The Four Horsemen are riding again, and we have a return guest, Barry from Evolve Talent. He is a lawyer and also a player agent and also fluent in both English and Korean. So he is the natural person to walk us through the T1 Zeus agency drama that has been
overqualified, you might
Korean...
say. More qualified than Joe Marsh in many ways, which I'm sure we'll get.
How come you weren't selected as the CEO of T1, Barry?
Oh, why wasn't I? Because I was doing other things. I was busy starting a company out of law school that represents players. But correction, I'm not a lawyer. I have a JD.
Oh,
I'm not a lawyer.
That's true. That's true.
That
you
is
haven't passed the bar.
Yeah. Took it twice. Still was building my company. That's my excuse.
What was the episode you was on last time? What was the topic when we had you on last time?
How to pass the bar.
Legal based. So what would it have been? Maybe Overwatch or something? What was it?
It was another player contract episode.
It was one of the. Yeah, it was. It was the. Didn't we get one of the hadn't one of the contracts been exposed or something? One of the boilerplate contracts.
I don't remember, but
a long time ago. It was one of the earlier episodes.
It's about 3 years ago.
Oh, it was the Peter Zhang TSM thing.
Oh, there you go.
That's right. Potentially embezzled the money. That was it. I knew it was something related to like League of Legends somehow. Okay.
Very good. All the dramas. We can't even keep track of them anymore in the Four Horsemen.
Sadly not.
Before we get started, guys, please subscribe to our channel. We never do this. Like it, leave a comment on the episode. Does help us. Also, head on over to the Last Free Nation Culture channel where we do Foreplay, our film series. Go subscribe over there. We also launched Last Free Nation Gaming recently for general gaming content, if you're interested in that. So give that a subscribe as well. We do appreciate it. Also, guys, as you know, Into the AM has been one of our consistent, wonderful long-term sponsors here on LFN. I'm wearing one of their shirts right now.
Rocking one as well.
They do, tons of men's apparel, guys, and this is their site-wide sale is going on from now until April 6th. That means you can get up to 60% off men's apparel. It could be unbranded tees, graphic tees, chinos, button-ups, polos, workout clothes. They have absolutely anything you could want. And not only do you get the 60% off, but you save 10% more always on their site by using our code LFN or going to the link intotheam.com/LFN. Also, we're doing a design collaboration with them now. So go to the LFN Discord to give feedback on our latest t-shirt design collaboration, the Into the AM Design feedback channel. So we can iterate on that design and get you guys something that you like that is helpful, even more helpful for us. So again, 60% off, up to 60% off everything on their site, plus an additional 10%. It's a fantastic deal. They ship worldwide, many places for free. So even if you live outside of the United States, lots of options there. They deliver to me in Korea, no problem. I know many places in Europe, they'll give free shipping once you hit a certain cart size. So it's a great time to support LFN. As usual, supporting our sponsors is the best way to support us here. So let's get into it. This episode, if you guys are not in League of Legends or have not been following it, reigning world champion top laner Zeus had an interesting and ongoing drama that it appears has finally concluded, although who can tell at this point in time, because it seemed like it ended shortly after he changed teams from T1 to Hanwha Life Esports in a massive free agency move at the end of last year. Probably the single biggest free agency move in League of Legends.
Definitely in Korean esports, yeah.
Definitely in Korean. We could argue perhaps some of them in China would have been equivalent sized. But what made this very important is that Zeus was arguably the most talented player on a back-to-back world championship winning roster. And also he plays a position in top lane, which is of particular need. And there isn't significant depth, particularly in the Korean scene, which meant that even if he wasn't the most sought after free agent in the world, he was like the crucial domino that had to fall in the offseason, because there are basically, guys, so you know, only 3 what we would consider elite players at his position in Korean esports. And those players are Zeus, a player called Keen, and a player called Thorin, who is significantly worse than those other twos. And then the drop off after Thorin is enormous. So The problem is that Zeus is one of truly like the top 2 most desired. Keen had already re-signed with Gen G, and so there were 2 teams, T1 and Hanwha Life Esports, who were fighting over Zeus's services, and then T1 lost the contract battle to Hanwha Life Esports, and then they had to settle for Doran, make an emergency contract kind of to Doran to get him on the roster, because if they hadn't gotten Doran, T1, who is trying to win their 3rd consecutive Worlds title, even though that is quite unlikely, I think we would say at this point, would be really quite screwed. So this is all to say that the contract negotiation was tense, even though Zeus was on T1. We start this with the fact that they kind of, for those people who don't understand LoL, it was very surprising that they won the World Championship this past year. It's not like they were coming in as big favorites. In fact, they were 1 game away from not even qualifying to the World Championship. They came in as the 4th seed from Korea, the lowest possible seed to qualify. And they were considered really big underdogs coming in, but they do have Faker, who is the greatest League player of all time, the most clutch League player of all time. They did manage to grind out their 2nd World Championship win. But the reason why, we have to start here, they weren't trying to contract Zeus previously is because they almost missed going to Worlds completely, and then nobody would have predicted that they would have won this World Championship. So after they did, Zeus wanted to test free agency to see what his market value was, because T1 basically didn't offer a compelling contract for him to re-sign during the time where they had exclusive negotiating rights for him.
Essentially, as you're saying, if you think about the way League of Legends works, in League of Legends, until someone's contract ends and the off-season arrives, the team has the prerogative. It's their choice whether he can talk to anyone else. So basically what Monty's saying is, if you actually also look at the way that the order in which they offered these contracts and when they offered them, it's almost implied T1 themselves didn't really know if this last year would work. But then they themselves tripped over, like, fuck, we won Worlds again. Better sign them all now. Whereas obviously they could have just taken care of all this before Worlds. They could have just locked everyone up. By the way, G2's done this many times in Europe. You can just lock them all up already, get them. Remember, if you do that, it's essentially almost like the org gets the option, because you can still sell him. You can still sell another org or bench them. But the way they did it almost made it look like they weren't sure themselves if they wanted all 5 players. Or maybe they were even going to let, I don't know, underperformance at Worlds decide who didn't get signed, and then they just scrambled afterwards to sign them, which I think is actually quite a key detail of this story. Is like, because the whole thing is going to be on their side about the idea of like, but we didn't get to have our say in free agency. It's like, mate, you had the whole year. You could have just been having these conversations anytime you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any insight, Barry, into the way that these negotiations work when when the teams have exclusive negotiating rights prior to their contract ending?
So, just to give a bit of background, I did work with a lot of NALCS players from 2017 until like 2021. So I've seen a lot of contracts. I worked with players that came over from Korea. I worked on contracts in Overwatch, so I have a pretty good idea of like how the contract ecosystem works in general for League of Legends. It may have changed over the last 3 years. I haven't actively represented League of Legends players in the last 3 years, but I don't think things would have changed that much. And if that's the case, then I think the biggest thing is the biggest thing here is the timeline, right, in which things occur. So the World Championships end November 2nd? Is that when the finals were?
I believe they were this past year, yeah.
Yeah, so November 2nd was when the World Finals ends. And then T1 wins, everyone's happy, right? And then looking at the global contract database, Zeus's contract was set to expire November 18th. So what that means is that...
Which is when so just to be clear, sorry to interrupt you, Barry, real quick. The way that contracts work in League of Legends is that everybody globally, their contracts will end on the same day. So if you are a free agent, that's when like the free agency period of the
It's actually one of the few
begins.
things I'll say I actually appreciate about Riot's influence in esports. So I can tell you in Counter-Strike, it's a nightmare that you have all these player breaks and times when people aren't playing, but like the contracts don't sync up at all. In fact, there's no rhyme or reason as to when the contracts are signed. So I will say it's the one thing actually in all of esports I'm aware of that actually gives something akin to an off-season in sports, where you know that is the time that people can restock the roster, re-up, decide if they want to go one way or another. That's actually one thing I can genuinely appreciate. And as you say, by the way, a key detail a lot of people might not know, I think a lot of people are under the impression that it's the day world's ends that the contract based on. So as you say, there was still plenty of time to go home, do your celebration, whatever, let clearer heads prevail, think what your strategy is, and you still had like a few weeks at this point in time, based on what you're saying here, to decide if you want to sign the player or not.
Yeah, you could have gone on a 4-day rager and then still had 12 days left over, So
that might explain some of the statements later made in this.
Who knows, man? The big drinking culture in Korea. Who knows, man? But so what that means is that when the contract ends on the 18th, technically, unless the team gives permission, the player and their representative cannot really talk to other teams, and other teams cannot approach that player officially, right? I say officially with air quotes, because any agent worth their salt would have been going around and talking to teams before that contract deadline, that contract end date. Essentially, they'd be going around saying that, hey, we're planning to hit free agency. If you guys have if you guys have interest, heads up. We might be talking with them, but get an offer together, right? And that's how any agent worth their salt would be going around hitting up teams, saying gauging interest, testing to see what the free market looks like, seeing how much interest there is. And I would imagine Zeus's rep would have done this. They would have been in communication with other teams, try to see hey, do we need to stick with T1 because there's no appetite on the free market to give him what he wants, or is there a team that's willing to go all in on Zeus, right? So that changes your kind of that changes how you approach an extension talk. So according to the timeline that I think the Play Zeus's agency gave, is that they started contract extension negotiations on November 12th, which is 6 days before the contract is set to expire. So they have an exclusive period where they're talking with just T1. But my assumption is that they knew that there was interest on the free agent market, and
they said they wanted to test free agency. To be clear, they told T1 that.
Yeah, they wanted to test free agency because they knew there was interest, because they probably talked with teams.
And also they have a brain and knew that. I mean, you would have to look. You could talk to nobody and know that there was interest in this player.
Right, but you also want to know for sure before, because the thing is, let me put it this way, you can go around, talk to teams, and it's hey, are you guys willing to put up $2 million and as a first offer later on down the road? And then if the team's we could put together that money, and then you're going to be okay, let's test free agents. Because I would then go to my player and say hey, we should think about free agency seriously. Let's see where these contract extension talks come in, and then let's set a number at which if T1 meets it, then we won't even go into free agency if they meet a certain number, right? You would set these goals with your client. So my guess is that,
which is implied that's what they did. It's implied they did both. Yeah,
according to the agency, right? So who knows, could be lying according to Joe Marsh, who according to everyone else could also be lying. So who knows who's telling the truth here? So I think the timeline is incredibly important in general. And I think where things got really messy here is that maybe T1 didn't necessarily think that there was another team out on the free agency market that would give the amount of money that the player was asking for. I
have a cultural question I want you to answer, actually, Barry. So it goes like this. I've spoken on this myself, but spoiler, in fact, even with T1 previously, even when actually my own life experience is what I'm talking about, people don't really want to hear a Westerner talk about what Korean culture is like and what the trends are and what they do or don't like. So let me ask you what you would say to this. One area I think as a Westerner, you're going to have a really hard time interpreting this story is you're going to look at it through, especially if you're American, or even from the UK, people think of the Premier League, etc. Free agency in the West is all about player power. In fact, even though it does sometimes happen, it's actually frowned upon once the player's contract has ended and he has no obligation to even be hey, you have to sign again. You owe that team. No, we treat it like a traditional job. You gave your labor, they paid you, the contract ended. Now it's your choice to go elsewhere if you want to and get a different contract or a bigger contract. And people, in fact, in the West will often even just say, hey, I can't blame him. He got the bag. That justifies everything. One area I think is very complicated complicated about this specific topic, and from my experience has been an issue, particularly within Korea, is this isn't just like a big name Korean player, like a world champion. This is a guy who, because he came from the academy system of T1 and he was like a homegrown prospect. It's why I think the area people are confused by, Barry, is if you were treating this like a Westerner and you were just judging it as a GM, you'd go, right, this is one that, like Monty said, this is one of the like most eligible free agents in the whole world. He's one of the best at his position. He's key for our org. Essentially, how much can we pay him? Like, let's go out of our way to pay him a massive contract. I get the sense instead, I'm purely speculating here, but this is why I want to get your take on it, that this is one of those examples of where within T1, potentially they were thinking something more along the lines like, hey, we made you. You sort of owe us to be in our team. If we want you as well, you should almost sort of be loyal, as it were. Like, we brought you up. We're the reason you are this famous player. We put you with Faker. We've helped you win the world championship. I think in that scenario, my sense is they didn't think it, like they think it's almost like disloyalty to then go, hey, but I want to see what someone else would pay me off. Someone will pay me $1 more or whatever. Like, what would you say on that? What would you say? It could be about T1. It could be more specifically Korean culture. What would you say? Is there a sentiment like that, do you think, in Korean esports or Korea in general?
I think the culture's been changing on that, like, because that was definitely a sentiment in the past, and I think like these days, with like kind of like everyone's like, hey, you gotta make your bag where you can. Even in Korea, like a lot of people are like, especially with like all the crypto stuff going on in Korea,
right,
where everyone's like, oh, you gotta make it while you can. Like there is a big sentiment about around that, and my understanding is that type of kind of cultural, like kind of like, hey, stay with the team that made you, has been changing quite a bit. I can tell you straight up that like Faker in like the mid 2010s had a huge offer from a Chinese team, but didn't take it because his dad told him like, hey, you should stay with T1, you should stay with SKT because, you know, they brought you up from nowhere and you would have never been as successful without them. And to their credit, T1 has taken care of Faker quite handsomely over the years.
You could even argue, by the way, that's actually a silent elephant in the room on this topic, is if you're Zeus, right now, you're actually better than Faker is at League of Legends. But Faker, because he's Faker, he has Faker's name, has an enormous contract. So there's another fact. I'm not just judging my market value, Barry. I'm also asking, like, well, that guy there gets paid millions. Can I get a good contract? There's also that too. You know, there's a bit of that.
Woven into this story is also the fact that Zeus himself arguably took a worse offer to continue in 2024 because he signed a 1-year deal. After winning Worlds, he had massive offers for some Chinese teams to go over there. And it, you know, there is a discussion here from the play that said that T1 went to his house and then they negotiated a deal with him and he stayed, probably out of loyalty and not out of money, because those Chinese teams were throwing massive amounts of money around it.
And that was going to be my point. Like, ultimately, when it comes to the concept that I've seen put out there by some fans that don't like the fact that he moved, he already did them the favor. The favor is the 1-year extension. He's already showed loyalty in that instance. Like,
and delivered a world championship. So
exactly. Like, I mean, what more do you need? I extended my contract by a year, probably to my to my financial detriment. Right, when I could have gone and got the bag as a world champion, I stayed. I won you another world championship. And by the way, I mean, look, I don't know if this is a factor, but to your point, Duncan, as well, about the Faker stuff, I thought all of the stuff just around, you know, Faker won him that championship. I'd be pissed off if I was a player watching all of that. I've signed an extension for a contract. I'm probably not getting the bag I could command elsewhere. I've shown loyalty. We've won another championship together. Everyone's talking about Faker, not me. So if I've got an agent, the first thing I'm saying to the agent is, listen, just get me the best deal. I like, ideally in Korea, but get me the best deal.
Yeah,
and I think that
who could blame him? In theory, you'll never have a better window. By the way, there's another thing people ignored. Look, I get in his case, he has just won 2 world championships. People don't win world championships very often in League of Legends. Like, that is the ultimate moment to get the big deal, as you say, Monty. Like, obviously, the LPL, it's their classic method. Is the joke is they really do have the industrialist guy go, bring me that guy who just won worlds. That is what they do over there. So you can't risk, by the way, like, let's run it back, and then next year you lose and then ask for a new contract. You're not going to get it. Like, this is your best time to ever get the big contract, potentially.
There's also an added wrinkle with, like, Korean players going to China where the adjustment period is incredibly difficult for a lot of Korean players, like in terms of like the food. I don't know how much this is the case now, but at least in the 2010s, you make money in China, but you couldn't really bring it to Korea because you get double tax.
You still can't
on it.
really do that.
Yeah, so like if
That's why. But there are ways around it. So what would happen is like the Chinese teams would buy real estate in Korea and then transfer it into the player's name, like real estate of equivalent value, buildings, coffee shops, whatever. They were like paid in
Property,
a lot of the times.
property.
I mean, real estate is king, you know? Like, they say cash is king, but land is really...
Just easy to flip when you leave. Like, and it
you can liquidate it, too.
Yeah, exactly.
You can appreciate and you can liquidate it. So, like, I mean, that could have been a big consideration, too, for that initial extension. Like, is that, like,
and you're right. Like, it also having the deal on the table from another Korean team, if you want to play in Korea for more money, is preferable to most Korean
I'll also
players.
just
like,
add,
I don't think...
like T1 here, like I don't think people realize how much they've really fumbled it. Because look, if I go to someone's house and I have a sit down and I persuade a player that is clearly at a point in their career where they can demand more, right? Like, you won a world championship, you are one of the best in a position that doesn't have a particularly deep talent pool. This is when you get paid, and we've negotiated a kind of interim deal in lieu of a bigger one that you could have had elsewhere. As soon as you win that second world championships, the understanding has to be like, it should have already been agreed as a performance bonus. If we run it back, we'll lock you up. If we win worlds again, we're keeping you, and we'll
Richard,
give you an extra 50%.
I would argue they should have locked him up well before they even qualified for Worlds, because here's the thing, this is why this situation is so ridiculous, is that he is clear. So Faker's already under contract for 2025. Zeus is clearly the second player. You know, maybe some people might say Keria, but like Zeus is the key player that you need to lock up. So even if you're going to break apart this roster in some way, there isn't a world where you don't want Zeus back. So they absolutely could have. I think what they thought is that, oh, our team isn't doing so well, which they weren't. Maybe we don't even qualify for Worlds, so we can get this guy on a deal. The problem is that by the time they win Worlds, he's not going to agree to not go to free agency, because they've, like Barry said, they probably already, tested the market a little bit. And so, his value's at an even higher point than it was the last year. But they should have given him an extension much earlier on in this year. And that's where all of this runs into so much trouble.
Yeah, it's like
they didn't do it.
It's the end of the Chicago Bulls is what it is. So, they didn't have the faith that they could have done it for 2 or 3. Yeah. So they only wanted to lock him up for 1, and then, oh shit, we won. We won the biggest prize against all of the odds. Now what do we do? Well, if you don't have a contingency, like, there has to be an understanding that, like, look, this could be the end of it. We're not sure. You're not sure. Let's do it for 1 more year, and if it works, we will come to you and we will negotiate a deal in good faith at that point. If you do us the solid now, we'll do you the solid down the road. That's the problem here. The organization quite clearly hasn't had the foresight to do that. And this has created this window where if you're a player in demand, this is what you do. Like, say, you can't blame the player and you can't blame the player agent. It's your job to get as much as you can. And certainly, to Barry's point about culture changing in Korea, yes, there was definitely, you rewind 5 years, org loyalty is a huge thing to a lot of these players, and there was a lot of kind of cruel barbs and insults thrown at players that went to inferior leagues to get money. I know that. I'm not heavily involved in league, but I know those players that went to LCS, they got a lot of shit and a lot of derision, and they had to explain it to their colleagues back home as, look, we're just doing it for the bag. We don't even like it out here. We're homesick. We try and get back all of the time. It's just a money-driven move. Now, the perception is you have very small windows. Your national service is always looming. You never know. They've just watched Overwatch come and die in 2-3 years, essentially, really, if we're being honest. That
probably changed people, people's opinions on a lot of this stuff, I'm sure.
Now they realize esports isn't forever, so let's get fucking paid.
I mean, I remember when I was working on like Overwatch League contracts, I was like, I actually did like a lot of like long-term outlook stuff because, you know, a guy called MonteCristo who is like on the, you know, casting desk for Overwatch League is like, this is the future of esports. This is the long-term
What
play.
a fucking shill
like,
that guy is, eh?
And then like, so like, I remember that guy telling me that stuff and I was like, okay, I should start making 5-year plans for my players. And then was in all reality was just that like, I really should just been making short-term, bigger money moves for all my players,
right,
rather than like long-term career development plans.
Yep.
And that's just something you learn as you like kind of like are in the business, right? It's just like at the end of the day, with how unstable esports has been and will probably continue to be for a long time, I think like it doesn't make sense for players to sign anything longer than a 2-year deal. And then even then, it's just you gotta maximize as much money as you can because your performance can fall off in 6 months, and you might not be able to recover with a bad patch. So it's a bad meta shift. So I think, I mean, even in like 2014, 15, when like you know Samsung White won, and then like all of those guys went to China, I think the prevailing sentiment among fans was that like, hey, Korea doesn't pay much. We're really happy that you're able to go get the money you're worth, right? Like the money that your playing ability deserves. So there was a lot of, there was definitely fans that were like, oh, why are you going to China? But like the overarching sentiment that I felt when I was like kind of reading social media in Korea was definitely like, hey, like these players deserve it. Go get the bag, right?
Yep.
So
it's worth noting that the payment that teams offer versus Korea versus in Korea versus China has basically kind of evened out at this point in time.
And
whereas back in the day,
has normalized it too. It's like,
yeah, there are basically luxury taxes for going over certain amounts of payroll for players in both China and Korea. Now, obviously, this should mean that they make player contract numbers public so that the audience knows what's going on, but of course they won't do that.
No players unions.
But yeah, but also it's just that the money has more or less dried up. I mean, it's still significant in China. Don't get me wrong.
It's concentrated,
but yeah, but it really has gone down really significantly because back in the day that Barry's talking about, there was this streaming war that was going on where there were all of these competing Chinese streaming platforms. And so they were paying players outrageous sums of money to stream on their platforms, way more than they were getting from their teams a lot of the time. And so that just made the streaming money huge in China because they were fighting for market share. So they were way overspending their return. Anyway, a lot of these streaming sites died, that money dried up, and it really hasn't. Also, the billionaires that own some of these Chinese teams have dialed down their spending, plus the luxury tax, et cetera, et cetera. So, and meanwhile, Korea has been going up and up and up, partially because of the existence of the two teams we're talking about today. So Hanwha Life is a chaebol, one of the Korean mega monopoly corporations.
Hanwha is the chaebol.
Hanwha is the chaebol.
Yeah.
Hanwha Life is the life insurance subsidiary of Hanwha, but Hanwha is a company that started in Korea making explosives.
Yep.
And now this is their life insurance arm because you'll learn in Korea, these companies. So, for example, SK Telecom is another massive chaebol that owns gas stations. SK Telecom just happens to be their mobile service provider. So it's like Verizon owning gas stations, right? Or I think SK Hynix is also a part of that same SK group.
Yep.
And SK Hynix is a massive like computer chip, semiconductor manufacturer. Yep. So it's all under the same umbrella. So we're talking about these companies that have like enormous amounts of money and also are being directly overseen by people who are part of the ownership group of the overall structure, as in literal billionaires who are personally interested in esports, which is why when Comcast came in, another giant multi-billion-dollar company, formed a joint venture. So SK Telecom T1 existed, and then Comcast came in and said, what if we just threw a bunch of money behind this and we created a new version of SK Telecom T1? And so that's when Joe Marsh comes in as the CEO, an American guy. Obviously, that's very weird considering that T1 had already had 20 years of esports experience and like being run by solely SK Telecom. So they create this joint venture. On the other side, Hanwha one of the heirs of the Hanwha Chaebol dynasty is personally interested in League of Legends. So we have our several individual billionaires who are fighting over these players effectively. And this has created what is an unsustainable market, right? Because this isn't about a business at this point in time. This is about who gets to win worlds, which is how it used to be in China too. It's also how it is in
a
sports,
dick measuring
right?
contest, to be clear.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, this is of course it is. But this is how it works in sports too. Like, it's not really any different. People will pay extraordinary sums of money in traditional sports to get the best players because they have a lot of money and they just want to win a championship, right? That's what they want to do with their money. It's whatever.
I mean, that's why you signed Russell Wilson to the Broncos, like that's why you do that.
No. Barry, that is the worst example of that.
Don't hit him in the Broncos.
That was before they actually had an owner. Okay. So that was because Pat Bolin had Alzheimer's and died, and that was during the period when all his kids were fighting him. So the Walton family who bought the Broncos was already saddled with that deal. They didn't make that choice. Right. Okay.
By the way, to bring it back,
my bad for jabbing Monty and the Broncos.
To bring it back on topic, there's two parts here. One, here's also why I find it disgusting that Joe Marsh, T1 and T1 fans would ever dare bring up the concept of loyalty on this particular deal. Think about what we just laid out and what Richard was talking about. If you were loyal, you decided before the Worlds in scenario in this situation. Yep. Whereas instead, your behavior, and Joe Marsh, ironically, even said in his own AMA that actions speak louder than words, then your actions are speaking voluminously, mate. Like, they're telling me you didn't believe in Zeus or that lineup of players. You only believed in Fake out of the entire team, and he was the only one you were willing to keep around to reboot in case things went bad. Because just to clarify, for people who don't know this, they were one game from not even qualifying to Worlds. KT Rolster would have gone instead of them in that regional. It was a 3-2 series. Like, they'd already lost a D+. Like, it isn't like they were top team and they just didn't know, well, will we win or come second? They didn't even know if they'd qualify or do anything at all at Worlds. So
they were looking really ropey too. They were looking
essentially
bad.
They chose to gamble on the potential, because the second they don't offer him a contract, and by the way, in that moment, this is even the point that we're making, but I'll make it more explicitly. Because Zeus himself is in a very uncertain position, that's when you could have probably got him for the bargain, mate. That's when the deal maybe could have been like a 1 or 2 year deal for whatever amount you want, just for security, so he knows he has a team next year. Instead, you gambled in that moment. Let's see if he fails and I can get him for nothing or not even have to sign him. It ended up being the best possible result for you, and now you're mad you don't get to also get the cheap deal that you wanted before. So to me, T1's actions did not seem like the actions of people who are loyal. In fact, they were acting more like a Western org, like, hey, when your contract's up, your contract's up. Hey, I don't owe you another contract, man. You are just an employee. And then secondly, I'll also feed another detail in, another cultural aspect I think you have to consider. Actually, specifically for T1, I wouldn't even apply this to the other teams. T1 is the only team where they seem to, and particularly Joe Marsh, seem to have intentionally K-popified the way their lineup is considered by fans. They haven't, like, here's the difference. People like Chovy actually haven't really been billed as like K-pop stars in Korea, as far as I can tell. They haven't played that angle up at all.
The fans do that for the
yeah, but the funny thing is, because it's the fans, that gets to be a separate thing. Because T1 themselves have gone out of their way to do this thing. I mean, the joke we've obviously referenced a million times is Joe Marsh himself even said some borderline inappropriate things, like maybe I'll oil owner up for like a photo shoot or something mental, which is like an insane thing for any employee. By the way,
and owner is like he's their jungler. He's like a jacked guy, and he was, to provide context, Joe Marsh was in the T1 fan Discord. The CEO of this company was saying that he was going to oil up owner so fans could ogle him.
I mean, put it this way, that's an instant HR, like fucking complaint / lawsuit in America. But okay, we all know.
I will say, if Jerry Jones says something about that, about like, Zeke Elliott, I'd be like, damn, like, do it. Go put your money where your mouth is. Like, do it.
So anyway, the point is he's already played to that angle and essentially like enabled, and I would even say encouraged, that behavior. So this, I actually do think, is not an irrelevant detail as to how this deal has happened, though, because one, the merchandising thing, which they're all really cheese, didn't come through, wasn't the idea of, hey, we've still got the other 4 that won Worlds. It was the idea that it's like a K-pop group. We've got the whole original group. We've got
the 5 stars.
By the way, this thing they do where they take the initial at the beginning of the name and make this thing of ZOFGK, so So Zeus, Owner, Faker, Gumayushi, Carrier. That wasn't even a thing, I'm not joking, until last year. I never ever heard that ever, Monty, until I think something, I'm going to guess like maybe like the middle of the year or something. It was like it suddenly became a thing from fans, as far as I can tell, but they were going to lean heavily into this. So they needed all 5. First of all, there's another reason this is so stupid. You can't cynically play hardball with someone where if you lose this small battle, you lose the entire war that you've built up all your resources towards, which is I must have all 5 players. So that's also a very silly thing. It's why I leaned into. I wonder if they thought that he'd almost owed them to re-sign. And then the thing I'll just say here is the reason why I bring up the K-pop detail is because I actually think it is a lens that explains why they fucked this up so badly, Monty. Because I told you, if I'm being a GM in League of Legends, I would have gone the opposite way. I already have Faker. I'm with you. I already have Faker. I would instantly sign Zeus because he's the only person I can't replace, by the way. Then I would go like, right, Carrier. I'd be very cynical. I'd do it based on in-game reasons, you know. Essentially, at the end, the last 2 I would sign is Order and Gumayushi because I'm sorry, you can get a better jungler and a better AD carry, even potentially a Korean one. The others, I think you can't replace. So the reason why I think they did it this order, Monty, is because they did it how you would sign a K-pop group. They signed the most popular players, and at the end, they tried to sign the least popular one, which I think is Zeus. If you look at like how all the others are treated, he's the only one that doesn't seem to get that crazy pop from the fans. They're all over. If people don't know, the reason why this whole Smash thing's gone on, it's Gumayushi is incredibly popular. Like, he is actually one of the more charismatic, outgoing players. Carrier has that sort of like cutesy vibe. I mean, I always say this. That's one of those areas I don't think it's that fun that fans do that. Like, we ship them. Because I pointed this out before. They do this thing, Monty, that I'll never understand how this is considered cool. They will go, I ship these 2 players, not as friends, as gay lovers, right? So because one guy is smaller than another and has a picture where he puts his head on someone's shoulder, you're just going to speculate he might get fucked up the arse by one of his teammates. I don't know about you guys. I think that's somewhat inappropriate speculation for a fan or anyone who actually would care about those people. You know, maybe just let him have his own life and have his own fucking dreams and sexuality. I don't know. That, to me, already you've sort of crossed the line there. But you sort of realise the space we're in now at this point.
That reminds me how in early League of Legends, I don't know if you recall this, Thorin. So like back in the very pre-LCS days, there were fans who were writing fanfics of like Hotshot GG and Double Lift, having sex, like explicit fanfics. But this was very common, like in the early days of League of Legends, where it wasn't even just like shipping them in an abstract sense. It was literally hardcore porn fanfics that people were writing.
But I actually do think that's what they did. If I had to speculate, I think what they did is they signed the most popular players.
Hard back in my mind.
You remember that, don't you, Barry?
Oh my god!
There were some really famous ones, actually.
Yeah, there was like Dyrus and his pillow. I remember. There was
to be fair, some of those were probably jokes, but they exist still. The internet never forgets.
I was trying.
You guys could link them in the comments.
I was trying to, man.
But yeah, I mean, look,
anyway.
to Duncan's point, it's why, by the way, like, so, look, Korean League of Legends fans are fucking, broadly speaking, demented, which is like, and so this idolification of esports professionals, it appeals to the worst kind of esports fan. I mean, like, you've already got like large swathes of fucking esports fans are just disturbed anyway. Like the
it's for the Chinese market as well.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Like it's like riding like the Hallyu, the K-pop wave thing with like Southeast Asia. There are larger marketing like angles you take with it, but then like as like a competitive sports team, like.
Yeah, for me, it's just totally inappropriate within a sports context. I mean, you know, again, to try and think of like anything that's analogous to that, it's kind of like in most sports, there's a general perception that anything that would distract you from the training and the day-to-day and performance and delivering on that, right, would be a bad thing. But also anything that would essentially intrude into the private life and give fans a window through which to peer through. Most sports accept that's like kind of like, look, there's a limit. You know, you go, you play, you sign the shirts, you know, you sign the jerseys, you sign the autographs, you're nice to the fans, you wave, you get on the bus and you fuck off. And then you come in for training on the weekend.
Also, your $40 million a year quarterback will also say no most of the time.
But,
a lot of that
but I
stuff
mean,
too.
what you don't do is you don't have a CEO speculating about, well, if we had a nude calendar of you, we'd make more money. And by the way, why don't we record a fucking single
But
and
this is also a factor. You know, we can't ignore the fact that the K-popification is actually, from a financial perspective, a good path to go down for T1. It has made them more
good
popular.
till them trucks start
It has
showing up outside your office, mate.
Well, I mean, but they can ignore those. But anyway, like, you know, the fact is that this is another symptom of esports not having traditional sports revenues. You can ignore those things when you have media rights deals and you have revenue, and the players are, through the NFL Players Association, they're negotiating for 50% of the revenue of the league, and the TV contracts are going up, so the players get paid more money, so the quarterback takes a higher percentage of the salary cap, and that's why he gets paid $40 million a year, because he is getting paid to play the game on television. That's where the money is coming from. That money doesn't exist in esports. And so the K-popification, what T1 did was they used local expertise. I imagine they hired people from the K-pop industry who knew how to do this in Korea, who knew how to do this kind of marketing, that knew how to do this kind of PR. And then they enacted it on their team because they don't have traditional sports revenue structures. And so this is the alternative. And look, man, I fucking hate it. This isn't why I got into esports, because I come at this from a sports angle, right? But we can't deny that it is a clever solution to a problem. Is it worth it? Sure. That's what we can debate. But I think why they did it is very clear, is they are trying to find alternative ways. And if we think about K-pop, sure, they sell concert tickets. But as we know, you know, the music industry, in terms of the music actually generating the significant amount of revenue like it used to in album sales, is gone. So what they have to do is create these cults so that they get money.
It's merch.
And so, yeah, it's merch. And it's, you know, it's maybe attending fan signings, it's sponsorships because you're popular. It's like how in music, the bulk of the revenue for most musicians now comes from the touring. Right? It doesn't come from the album sales, right? And so I think what they looked at, and I do think this is clever by T1, is they said the music industry is actually shockingly similar to the esports industry. The old model, i.e. the old model where you sold albums, or the old sports model, isn't applicable. So we have to go through for massive reach and alternative forms of revenue, and this is what they came up with. Now,
by the way, Monty, I agree with you. You could actually say, in terms of like connection with the fans, it was successful, because if you think of the era when Joe Marsh and Comcast came in, well, the joke is they were actually a much better and more dominant team before with the Korean org, but even Faker didn't actually have he was a very popular player.
He didn't have the aura.
He didn't have this K-pop angle to him. Like, I would say, even if they hadn't won any of these last two worlds, they seem like they were more popular players. Even Faker seems more popular, mate, and he actually is on the downslope of his career.
Quick question, mild aside. It's like, do you know the rumors for how much Zeus's like contract is, or how much he was asking for? I think I saw 2 billion won, which is about.
I suspect it was between $1 and $2 million, which is 2 billion won is about $1.5 million.
1.36. Yeah.
And isn't supposedly Faker on like 5 million or something though? Like.
Yeah, but they also do the funny math with Faker where it's like he doesn't count against the cap, and also he gets paid like marketing from SK Telecom to represent their brand. I don't think it's all in his like playing contract. He has external contracts. I mean, there are some funny numbers going on with Faker's deal for sure.
Faker almost certainly makes a lot more than whatever they're offering Zeus, yeah?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. He's the cornerstone of their team, right?
Yeah, he's the face of the team too.
Which, by the way, is a problem in this scenario, because you're having to pay the old guy almost for his name and who he is, whereas the current guy can actually do it in the game for you. Like, I think you've also got a battle there that they had to figure out too.
Yeah, I also think that if you're Zeus, you know, you did your time with T1, you paid them back by signing the additional year, you won another world championship, and like, there's a very serious consideration here when we talk about his free agency period, which is that, does he want to live under Faker's shadow another year? Potentially forever? You know what I mean? Faker's not retiring anytime soon as far as we can tell. And even if he did, he is never going to be bigger than Faker as long as he is on T1. And so there's not only the money aspect, but Hanwha Life is literally the reigning champions of Korea right now. It's not T1. Hanwha Life won the last domestic title. And they are a team that was basically, they had Thorin, this player that we talked about is like the clear-cut number 3 top laner. So number 3 player at his position. Sorry about the break, guys. Just we had a little hiccup there. But yeah, as we were saying, I think part of this consideration as we look at Zeus's options and free agency was not only money, but his legacy as a player. And Hanwha Life is the reigning champion of LCK. They have a incredibly stacked roster with a noticeable weakness in his position. And honestly, if you look at Hanwha Life, this iteration of their roster where they changed nobody except for Zeus, it is possible, given, depending on how they do this year, that this is the greatest roster in League of Legends history. Like that is on the table right
and we
now.
now do know they went on to win the split and to win the international tournament. We didn't know that at the time this deal was done, but thus far, like this move also, this is another problem I had when the off-season came, is T1, I understand why they would do this, but Joe Marsh almost made it sound like, maybe we'll even get into this, like this wouldn't be in Zeus's interests to go to this other team. He almost made it sound like there's nowhere in the world but T1, and somehow you're not going to win if you go elsewhere. And then the worst thing to me is he told some weird story. This is why it's so interesting later they claim he wasn't referencing this particular case, because he tells some story that last year he makes it basically sound, Monty, like they were like fucking putting Zeus into a suitcase to sneak him off into LPL, and then last second like Cole came in like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, whoa, Zeus, blink twice if you're in trouble. And then they like rescued him and brought him back to T1, and then everything was great, right? So one of the weirdest things to me is fans and T1 almost implied as though like, well, obviously there had to be some fuckery in this deal, because why would anyone leave T1? Well, as we've just said, Monty, the second Zeus leaves T1, Hanwha Life's roster is better than T1's, and in fact, it's even been borne out in the game. They won the split, they beat T1, and they won the fucking international tournament. Like, so far, they have done everything twice. You could hope for. Exactly. So thus far, like, that's also why I think this story was so messy, because since it's K-popified, their fans were going off the idea, we just want him to be on T1. It wasn't necessarily that this has to be the team you stay for. So that did get spun as though, like, why would he go anywhere else? Which is like, that's a whole kettle of fish in itself.
I think in general, esports teams are not the best at long-term planning. We've seen this time and time and again. I mean, Monty's seen this. You've seen this, Duncan, in various esports.
I mean, to be fair, traditional sports teams are also not the best at long-term planning. Like,
yeah,
it's an institutional failure.
Yeah, it's a sports failure in general. Sure. I think most people just aren't very good at long-term planning, I guess, then, when we put it that way. But
it's also, like, in both sports and esports, it's incredibly difficult to make those long-term plans for the reasons you mentioned earlier, Barry, about, like, you never know what performance dips could happen, or the meta may change. It's even more volatile in esports. Mm-hmm. If you were T1, no one at T1 would have gone into Worlds saying, we're the favorites this year. That would have been ridiculous given their performance. And they did win, which is a testament to their, improvement, clutch abilities, experience of their players,
probably the staff, coaches, everything. Like, they did a great job, but you wouldn't have said that they were anywhere close to being the favorites. Like, if T1 was probably, to put this in context for non-LoL fans, I don't know, Thorin, like 5th, 6th favorite, optimistically. Right?
I mean, I think as far as I know, it was only even people like Dom even gave like an outside chance they could win. Like, everyone else came in. Like, the one thing you can say is they won't be winning this tournament. Like, that was like everyone's starting position. I think most people just thought make playoffs is a good run, actually.
Yeah. So anyway, but let's get into the actual drama here, because the agency is called ThePlay, guys, just so you know. And Joe Marsh, this is where all the drama begins, which is that there are a bunch of accusations that are made publicly by both sides of this in November of last year that have again resurfaced with actual journalists involved this time, because the big story that came out recently, as in March of 2025, was that InVen, which is a journalism website for esports. It's been around forever. It is considered one of the top websites and employs professional journalists alongside having message boards, released an article about ThePlay going through the kind of blow by blow of this free agency negotiation. And the documents were vetted this time by an independent journalist who wrote this story, right? So they were provided by ThePlay, but this is kind of, it bolsters ThePlay's case. And the reason why ThePlay is doing this almost 6 months later is because their reputation was tarnished by accusations that T1 was throwing out at the time that the agency had performed improperly in some way. And effectively, the thrust of this, and you guys can fill in the color of it, is that T1 alleges that the play did not have Zeus's best interests in mind because they weren't accepting counteroffers. And all this boils down to is that on the day that free agency opens, which was November 19th of 2024, T1 was not given a, quote, fair, unquote, attempt to recontract Zeus after he had received offers, most notably, probably from other teams as well, but most notably from Hanwha Life.
T1 was saying that the play were not giving counter proposals.
That's true.
Yeah.
So basically, T1 in their exclusive negotiating position post Worlds had given proposals. The play said, "We'd like to test the free agency market." That's totally understandable. And then on the day of free agency, Hanwha Life set a 3 p.m. deadline to sign because, again, they have to know to recontract Thorin because Thorin was on Hanwha Life at the time, or get a different top laner. So he's the domino that has to fall. And it is, I think, totally reasonable for a team to say, here's the hard deadline, because you don't want negotiations to go on forever and you to get screwed while all the other good players are potentially contracted. So Hanwha said, here's our final best offer. 3 p.m. is the deadline. And then T1 starts accusing the play of not meeting to get counter offers from T1.
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't even understand, like, what is wrong with Joe Marsh's brain in this instance, because it's like, as someone that follows a lot of sports and sports that has free agency in them and transfer deadlines baked into them, as most sports do, you have a transfer window, you have to get things done by a certain date, certain time, there's a hard cutoff. Like, when there's an offer on the table that all the parties seem to be happy about,
my guess,
you're under no obligation to get another goal. You've had all of the bidding. You've had an entire year with this player. You had the chance to lock the player up when you only gave him one. You couldn't have had more chances. This is just as simple as this. There's our offer. I bet this offer was a mega offer compared to what T1 had put on the table. And they said, do you want to sign? Like, we need you to sign by 3. And they go to the player. How do you feel about that? Player goes, the money's right. That's that. I don't need to pick up the phone. I can pick up the phone and go, right, look, it's 5-3. We've got you by the balls, and now we can fucking twist. You got to go up. You got to give me 2 mil, or this deal can't be done, or whatever it is. But I don't have to do that. I could just say, if everyone's happy,
my
just sign
guess
this
is
deal.
that T1 had a specific plan on how to handle Zeus's contract negotiation, and then they had a series of assumptions that, I guess, assumption number 1 was there probably was no other team that was going to bid over what we were going to bid, what we were giving, like what they were offering to Zeus initially in that, like, 6 and before free agency opened, when they had the exclusive negotiating window. So they were probably like, no team would be crazy enough to give more than this. And then Hanwha Life comes in with like a massive offer, and then they're scrambling to like see if they can even like free up budget for it. Like, it was just like they just had no chance to react properly to it, and that's what they were angry about.
But based on how the play handled the cards on the table, like, it says to me that T1 never got close.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's
the weirdest thing about the way that it was actually proposed is it's Joe Marsh's side. By the way, T1 themselves have disputed this now. It's Joe Marsh's side that made it like this was just about money, and maybe the agency's doing this because they're getting more money, and this is just about getting more money from Zeus's deal.
Well, they said they'd get 0%.
If you actually read what the player themselves say and what it's implied from Zeus's side is it was never about money. He was apparently fine with whatever they offered. He just wanted, I believe it was a 2-year deal. By the way, think again of people saying this is about loyalty. So your loyalty to me is, I've just won you 2 world championships. Can I have a 2-year contract? Nah, you only get 1 in case you shit after 1 year. Like, what the fuck loyalty is that? Like, that's the weirdest part as well, because anyone who has eyes
that's how
to
it
see,
always worked with teams.
anyone who has eyes to see knows this play. No, it's the opposite way, Barry. It's in Counter-Strike, the team wants you to have more years than you have. The other way around, they get the control that way. The idea. You only give someone a 1-year contract, Barry, if they might be shit after the 1 year. Like, because think about it. If there's any chance they could be as good, they can ask for even more next year. You actually want to lock them down for a longer deal now. So that's the weirdest part to me. Is as far as I can tell, if they'd have just agreed to a 2-year deal, Zeus would be in the T1 colours right now. That's the weirdest thing about this whole story to me, because it implies they wanted a second chance to just run it back for 1 year, and then if the lineup failed again, then split it all apart. So what's weird is they just wanted to like rewind to what they did last year, just get the same deal again or something comparable, you know.
One of the things that happened is that the T1 offered, so there were both Hanwha and T1 apparently offered 1+1 deals, but the difference is that the T1 deal was the team option, so the team could decline it, and Hanwha's deal was the player option. So basically the contract he took was for more money and had the player option, so after this year, he can choose whether the contract renews or not. So he can stay on for 2 years. It'll be his choice, not Hanwha's.
Which is insane. They're effectively offering
exactly
him a 2-year deal.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. By the way, here's the thing, though, like I said, Barry, the reason I find it so weird is, though, like, that's the problem. I agree with you. If it was just about money, like, basically, if the premise was, I'll give you a random number. Obviously, this isn't right, but let's say the number was 500K from T1, and then, as you say, maybe Hanwha comes in at like 2 million, right? Yeah, obviously, if my budget was, I can go to 500K, and you ask for 4 times, well, I'm going to have to go away and figure out whether, do I even get this money? Is it available? But the weirdest thing to me is, if all the guy really says in his counter proposal is, can I just have 2 years instead of 1? We can do this in 5 minutes. That's just a yes. Like, is that even? Because again,
so we'll figure it out later.
You can also figure out the second year next year, like you say. That's one of the weirdest details about this, because that gets skipped. People miss that detail so often. They just make it about, did Hanwha do a crazy offer he couldn't say no to?
Or trade him in his last year to Hanwha for like a buyout.
You could also do that as well. That's why to me, if the team has the org, if they have their deal, they can choose what they do with you after 1 year. So to me, it also just shows you didn't really believe in this player, bizarrely. I don't get it myself. That's the most puzzling thing about it.
It's the classic thing that I always ran into is like the more a team says, like, talks about like team loyalty, like you know, the less they truly mean it. Because, like, you know, the person that's always like, you gotta be loyal, and like you gotta stick together, we gotta, you know, really gotta work together, you know, we gotta come together to, like, you know, do all these hard things. And then at the end of the day, like, these are always the teams that never like will bet on the player. They'll always like be safe. They'll never want to like take that leap of faith that the player might take in order to, like, you know, get their career started. So
you notice as well that almost becomes a euphemism, Barry. Like, hey, let's all be loyal is almost a euphemism for give us a discount. It's never like, let's be loyal. I'll commit to you and give you the biggest contract in the world, and you commit that you'll be the best player. Let's all be loyal. No, it's always like, hey, we've come a long way together, so let's just agree that it's family deal. Right. You do different deals with family than other. It's almost
it's implied that this is the conversation they wanted to have with him too, because one of the
I
complaints
love that detail,
T1
Monty.
had.
My favorite detail of all is that they were doing offers where if you just accepted it, the deal's done. But then when it doesn't work, they're like, you have to meet us in person, though. You have to actually like, meet me at that restaurant where we first met on a Friday. And like, that was like a weird, like, if I get you in person, I'll press you. That was like the implication.
I will say, like, the in-person thing, like, I think Joe Marsh is like taller than the average Korean dude in general. I don't know how tall he is. By my assumption, he's probably like 5'10",
I don't know if it was him. I believe it was like the Korean person negotiator was supposed to meet him. I'm not sure it was actually Joe Marsh who was going to meet them.
Like, there's a lot of things that happen in person where it's like that, like, you know, physical, like, kind of like, you know, as a height, you know, a lot of the stuff where you can kind of like, I don't want to say intimidate, but at least like use your physical presence to like get the player to, like, Barry, be more agreeable.
In this scenario, if people know Korean pro players, if you're a pro player and you meet like an actual like executive of an esports org, in real life, it's going to seem way more jarring, the juxtaposition, Barry, that you're some little nerd who was just a kid in a PC bang 3 years ago, and he's a guy in a suit looking very professional. Yeah, automatically, it's going to frame the negotiation very differently. I'm with you, mate. Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a sales principle in general. Anyone who's ever worked in sales, it's easier to sell something in person than it is over the phone or whatever. It's a lot. It's a lot easier to say.
And this
no
was the same.
Via
this is
a
the same thing they talked about doing
call.
last year, which is that when the Chinese offer came in, they went there and they convinced him. And also, this is a delaying tactic because look, this situation is very simple. Hanwha Life sets a deadline. Hanwha Life wants that deadline followed. Now, you can obviously submit an offer via email, give them a phone call, but Seoul is a massive city that can take hours to get across, right? And so
An hour at most. You can get to anywhere within Seoul within an hour.
Yeah, he might have been an Incheon or somewhere. Like, who knows?
Okay, yeah,
is the
fair
point,
enough.
right? But
they do that thing, remember, Barry, like London, where they go, it's in Seoul, and then you find out it's like Monty says,
it's like it's Milton Keynes.
Yeah, it's a suburb vaguely away. And you go, like when LS used to tell me, I'll get you a better place in Seoul. I would look on the map and go, no thanks, LS. I'd actually have to live in Seoul, mate.
I mean, it's a city of 25 million people. It's one of the largest cities in the world. Regardless, like you can't get there quickly is the point. And especially in the middle of the day, there could be you just don't know. So he can't wait because this offer's on the table.
Would be a brilliant movie though. Great film where the guy is on. He's racing to get there for 3 p.m. You know, it's all it's like the movie Crank, but esports contracts basically.
Run, Jola, run.
There you go. Joe just caught in the time loop, winning the world championship over and over again.
But he can never sign the play because he can never get there in time. There's your film idea right there.
The idea here is that they wanted to meet in person, right? But the thing is this also could have been a delaying tactic, as the play says, which is that if they wait for it, then perhaps Hanwha's offer expires. Then T1 is the only bidder potentially in Korea. And so they can actually just make a lower bid at that point in time, right? They have more leverage in that situation. So why they
maybe
needed
they
to
just
meet with him in person?
this guy. Maybe they do the deal in person, Monty, and then when he doesn't agree, they go, "Well, bad luck for you." And then what do you mean?
You got to meet in person. You got to spit on your hand and then shake it.
By the way,
when he doesn't agree to the deal, they go, "Oh, well, bad luck for you." Then he goes, "Why is that? I'm going to join the other team." They just signed Thorin half an hour ago. Oh, they did me. Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Shit.
I do wonder how the play, the agency side was like kind of communicating it though, like because if they like, if I was in that situation, right, and then like Hanwha had made like a deadline with like this crazy deal, and I would just be really like honest with T1, right? I'd be like, hey, there's this insane deal we'd be stupid not to take. We have to respond to it by 3 p.m. If you match this number, we'll take your deal over their deal. And then just lay it out like that. And if you don't want to match it, then you just move on, right? Like you make it incredibly transparent, easy for everybody. And I wonder what exactly that communication between the Zeus's reps and T1 looked like. Because I think that's where things probably like get it really fuzzy. It's like,
well, it's why the most interesting.
Put it this way, Barry. Yeah, I was going to put it this way, Barry. Based on the timeline that is out there publicly, it just looks like T1 fucked around too much. Like, so.
By the way, how many in-person meetings do they need? They've had 2 years of in-person meetings with Zeus.
Well,
like,
they already
it's not
had
move
two
the needle
on the 12th and 15th.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's like it's not like they don't know them, right? They've had 1 million in-person meetings. Just fucking submit your best offer. Just do it.
Like, I'm with you, Barry. Right, like 100%. Just out of due diligence to my client as an agent, I probably still pick up the phone and go, "This is what we've got. It's got to be done by 3, but we still have a preference to you. But you've got to match this deal, or we can't get nothing done. Just say yes or no, in or out now before 3 o'clock." Right? I probably do that, but if I've been fucked around on the 12th, on the 15th, on the 16th, we've had all these like conversations and negotiations, and I've told you like this ain't good enough. This ain't it, chief. You're gonna have to go here. You're gonna like put it this way. There is a baseline level of respect that when you enter into any negotiation, you have to bring that to the table. And if I feel like my client's being disrespected,
or Zeus might have felt disrespected, and he could have just said, "Stop negotiating with these guys."
Like so. You are not under any as an agency, as an agent. I don't need to tell Barry this or anyone this really. Like my obligation is my client happy? And at the moment he tells me he is, then anything else I do beyond that point to get him extra money or extra benefits or extra perks or a different team, that's all going above and beyond and is probably totally unnecessary. I have got the deal my client wants. That's it. And so if T1 want to have that level of respect with agents, by the way, they've totally fucked that up as a concept now, probably in the whole region. I can't imagine this has played out very well for them at all in terms
all
of
the
future
work hate agents
negotiations
anyways
when
in
you
Korea.
call into
like
question.
That's
Yeah, I mean, true. I get it. It's no different in an A really as well. Like, and I understand it. They are kind of diametrically opposed in terms of what they want to do, but still, there's room for a relationship there. And a relationship, it has to be give or take. You can't just come in with lowball offers, take the piss, waste my time. I have to reply to that. I have to reply to that and say, no, we got to get closer. Then you reply. Then I reply. Then you reply. Then I reply. Can we stop doing the fucking dance? This is what we need. And basically, as far as I can tell, T1 didn't do that. The organization Hanwha came in, they did do that. If the client is happy, me as an agent, I'm happy. So as I said, I think reading between the lines, the fact that they even wanted to try free agency is a testament to how poor T1 handled negotiations and how poorly they played their hand.
And by the way,
The
most interesting thing about this story to me now is that for a long time, I mean, technically not, like some of the stuff actually that people have been linking in the last few weeks was actually things that were already put out, like I think a month before. They just mainly were on the Korean side, and I don't think they made it to Reddit or something in the West, or maybe that agent thing wasn't translated. I forget what the details were, but some of it had come out. Is the initial story was just in the offseason. It was all T1 side. It was all Joe Marsh. It was all T1. By the way, this was all even initially before Zeus had signed even. He was putting all this stuff out there publicly. By the way, that in itself tells me right there's something going on. When the org that's still in the hunt to sign him is putting stuff out there via whatever methods, like back channeling and stuff. So there's that. And then also, T1's response to him signing was people like Joe Marsh basically saying things along the lines of like, essentially, we'll sue the shit out of you and you'll sort of never work in this town again, to the agency. Like, we're going to like expose how unprofessional they are. And one of the things that's interesting about the response of the agency is now one party must, I mean, look, obviously both parties could also both be lying, but one party inarguably must be categorically lying about the facts of this negotiation, because the T1 side was the claim that this like timeline, that the deadline was set, but that they'd talked to Hanwha, Joe Marsh said this, and that there wasn't any deadline, that was a lie from the agency, and that there was no counter proposal ever given after T1's initial offer. Now instead, the player claim the deadline was from Hanwha. I think even Hanwha themselves confirmed as much. I forget this. I think they did that separately. And then the play agency claims there were many counter proposals. In fact, they even said, and this is actually very interesting if true, they even claimed something like that at the very end, once basically the deal was like going to be done with Hanwha, that Zeus was almost like, look, I have to personally talk to the T1 guy myself, though, the negotiator guy, and just sort of like clear the air, sort of. And that when he did so, the T1 guy still was sort of like, no deal unless you do it like playing hardball, sort of. So one side has to be lying about that, because this isn't interpretation. Like, were there actually counter proposals? Was there a deadline for Hanwha? These things are just facts. We can be established one way or another.
And we have to assume that they were established, because otherwise InVen would not have published this article. They have a journalist who is verifying these things. And it even goes so far as in the final article that was just released, it literally says this: the CEO of ThePlay said, due to a confidentiality clause, we cannot disclose the offer. If T1 agrees, we're willing to reveal not only the initial offer, but the entire negotiating history and details. So they have now kicked it back to T1 and said, if you lift the confidentiality clause, we are happy to release all this information publicly. But the reporter has definitely already seen that information, right? And is just keeping it confidential in order to write this story. Mm-hmm. And also, like, a lot of this information comes from a fucking FM Korea, which is like, let's just call it Korean Reddit. It's a discussion board that esports fans use. Joe Marsh went on there and did an AMA after the signing in like a few days later. So this is November 22nd. So it's 3 days after the contract is signed with Zeus and Hanwha Life. And he claims in this, he says they were never given the opportunity to match any offer. The agent didn't present any counter offers or counter proposals. He makes a joke. He said, a fan asked, can you show how much Zeus was getting paid by signaling with your fingers? He says, you'd have to ask Zeus, or better yet, try his agent if you could actually get him to the table, which is like the refusal to do the in-person meeting. So now he's just like, he's making jokes about this and trying to malign the agency. They say they would match they would match any amount of money paid to Zeus. By the way, they had the chance to do that. They just fucking didn't do it. They just didn't do it. So either they didn't do it or they did do it. And Zeus himself just said, I'm taking that Hanwha offer. Right. And even if they were for the same amount of money, it's now been revealed that it's the team option versus the player option for the 2-year deal, the 1+1 deals, right? And Hanwha was more generous on that front. So there was also other factors to the contract that would have potentially made it more popular. So Joe Marsh just goes on there and does this. Now, why the CEO of the company needs to go onto a fan forum and conduct an AMA about this negotiation is completely beyond me. But there may be many positives.
I mean, mere days after as well. The timing
and also,
is absolutely
remember
lousy.
that Joe Marsh was not present for these negotiations. These negotiations are occurring in a language he does not speak.
Monty, I know you're saying that rhetorically, but the obvious reason to do this is to rally the troops, which are these fans, to go mental on your behalf and to repeat all these things as
But
facts.
why him? Why is he the one doing it? Like, that's always the question with Joe Marsh is, why does Joe Marsh feel that Joe Marsh needs to be a public figure for T1? Why? Why is that the case? And especially in the ways he does it.
You know why,
like,
obviously.
it's almost as though he has a pathological need for the love of Korean teenagers. So he has to go on and do this shit. It's bewildering. Why is he in the fan discords talking about oiling up owner? Why is he making public tweets? He is literally making public tweets where he is accusing Hanwha Life and the agency of lying during this period.
I will say this, Monty. I don't think his PR game is particularly strong because he's still doing that thing on Twitter where he has tweets of my own in his bio, which is protected absolutely no one from any opinion or any liability for anything they've said. In
also,
public
just
forum
doesn't work either.
So.
I'm sorry, Joe Marsh. Your tweets absolutely do recommend checks notes. T1, you fucking cretin. You're the CEO. Like, it's not your diary. You know what? It is your public social media platform.
Joe Marsh also accuses the play of not doing the best by the player because he believes, which is a fair thing to believe about the agency, that they are getting a percentage revenue share in the contract, right? They get
The commission.
10 to 20%, whatever it is.
Yeah, which is
standard. So he makes this accusation, but we also find out that that's not even true from the play because we find out later that Zeus they have a 0% commission. And in fact, they themselves say the way we plan on getting paid from Zeus is after his playing career is over. That's when we get a cut of his earnings at that point in time based off of his fame, whether he becomes a streamer or whatever. So they actually say it was in our best interest to have him stay at T1 because he would have been potentially more famous, had more fans at T1, which is a true statement based on the way that they've marketed the team, than if he goes to Hanwha Life, because we don't get a cut of his potentially bigger contract to Hanwha Life. But Joe Marsh was just throwing these accusations out there without having the full suite of facts around what Zeus's fucking deal with the agency actually was, which, it's a fair assumption for him to make, but don't say that publicly, right?
Yeah.
By the way, this does bring us to what is essentially like the last act, if you want to get into it, which is the update, which I never expected this part to come out. I thought maybe... I was kind of 50-50 on whether Hanwha Life or the agency ever even addressed this topic, because to me, they sort of won. Essentially, you just ride out the storm of the T1 fans. By the way, the second you win LCK, forget even first hand, as soon as you win LCK, you've won anyway. Like, it worked out for Zeus, he's on a better team, you're better than T1, you beat T1. At that point, you can also just sort of go, look, winning, by the way, oftentimes wins most arguments in esports anyway, whether you're right or not, I can tell you. So I actually didn't expect them to do a counter thing. I thought to myself, look, the magical lawsuits never seem to have appeared, and it does seem like that was a lot of hot air from T1, probably because they were raged. They were mad that they didn't get where they wanted in the off-season. It ruined their whole marketing thing and probably put a lot of pressure on them, etc. And also, by the way, another thing that I think is quite funny, but then again, who gives a fuck, is now it's even implied, well, maybe we wouldn't have signed all the others if we'd known you weren't signing. It's like, well, that's that loyalty again, Joe. Notice how that one works, mate. So let's put that to one side. The interesting thing is now, with T1 themselves have come out, guys, and addressed this topic and essentially almost done the oh, that Joe Marsh, silly old Joe, like on some Biden level shit. Oh, that's not what Joe meant. Joe was just saying something. He just...
It's always the Joes.
Yeah, he was just tired that day, because they made this weird thing where they went out of their way to explicitly say that when he said that thing about the financial benefit and prioritization, that wasn't actually supposed to be about the play agency. He just sort of meant agencies like the play in past instances. Definitely vague ones and not any way could be sued over. I want to ask you about that, Barry. Some people have speculated that almost almost looks like a lawyer or something told them, like, say it in this exact way to protect us from if the other thing happens, if actually they sue us for defamation or something like that, right? What would you say?
I don't know. Like, my assumption was that, like, somebody higher up than Joe probably was like, just make this go away.
So just someone in the corporate ladder was like, look, this has gone badly. Just
This is stupid. Like, why are we?
Yes, have
why
someone
is this
sort of
still
say
a
that,
headline?
have someone say you were just speculating or you were representing T1 or something, basically.
Yeah, or
Right.
just we're not going to release confidential logs on our
Right.
end, so let's just bury this and then move on. So that's probably what it is. Hope maybe this is the end of it. Who knows?
Sure. And by the way, I will say,
I mean, look,
obviously, orcs can say things that aren't true, but I will say it. Just to my old pal LS, who I understand has a different perspective on Joe Marsh, because he apparently is a personal friend of his and he's done lots of nice things to him. Sorry, LS, he hasn't done nice things to me or any of the people in this story, so I don't give a flying fuck. Like, that, all the nice things about you, I just think, why can't I be nice to Zeus then, mate? Why can't I be nice to Zeus's agents? Why can't I be nice to the other? You know, crazy idea, but put that to one side. One of the weirdest things is, his whole take is sort of like, oh, why are people being so mean to Joe Marsh over this? It's like, bro, even T1 basically says Joe Marsh don't know what they're talking about. That's their official line now, mate. Like, what do you want? Like, talk to T1. Maybe they don't know Joe Marsh like
I mean,
you.
look, I've got a question, right? And it's not why does he pronounce it Zeus? That isn't the question.
Okay.
Because clearly it's Zeus. But anyway, the
It's Korean pronunciation of that spelling, basically, is the answer to your question.
Don't care.
But yeah.
Don't care. So the
Anglo-centric
question-
worldview strikes again.
Listen,
All I'm gonna
Joe's
say,
a Greek name.
it's
Barry,
Zeus. It's a
Barry,
Greek name.
I have to agree with Richard in one respect, which is you don't call him Paker. So until you call him Paker, you little fuck, you're westernized.
Like you,
exactly.
like
got you nailed.
Yeah, right. So anyway,
Got him.
you've been nutted on these on this podcast. Anyway, the real question is, why is Joe Marsh? I can't explain it. I've looked in, like, why does this heavily Korean organization, recognized as one of the most successful Korean esports organizations, if you include all the SKT legacy, etc., why does it just have this random American chump from Philadelphia just talking shit all the time? Like, why is Joe Marsh?
I mean, the assumption is that they've put in, Comcast Spectacorp's put in a large amount of money into the venture. They trust Joe Marsh for various maybe reasons that are out there, and whether they're valid or not, who knows? But like,
This does feel like one of those
they trust
weird-
Joe Marsh, so like he's
You know
their
those weird
representative. there.
nepotism things where it's like, right, here's the money, but you got to let my wife's son has to be on the board. That's what this feels like. It's like one of those weird ones, you know. Like,
I
The
think
thing is,
it's
so
less that, and it's more just like, hey, like I know Joe is aligned with our interests and how we want to run things, so we're gonna have Joe there.
Joe's a friend of Comcast, is what happened. Like, Joe Marsh.
yeah, but even then, here's the problem, Barry. Here's what I don't get about that, though, because to me, the cynical way you should do this is this. Joe Marsh's job should be to address Western and English-speaking fans. That would make sense. The fact that he goes and interferes and puts his name all over the shit, like with the Smash move, with the Korean fans, what I can't understand is this, Barry. That would never have played well with Koreans. Like, from what I know about Korean people, you'd have to be like the most crazy, like, Koreaphile type person who'd lived there for years, shown like incredible deference. You'd have to know loads of the idea. You'd sort of be telling people, I'm sort of overruling the coaches. That I think that would play terribly
We
even
haven't
if
even
you're a
gotten
winning
to that
org,
yet.
mate. You know what I mean? Like, that part's really. That's why I don't get.
So
I agree with
that's-
Richard. Why let that guy interfere with the Korean side
This is
of it, mate?
this is a separate part of this saga. But for those of you guys who haven't been keeping up with League of Legends, what has now happened is, the Zeus drama notwithstanding, the new drama with T1 is that they had a rookie player in a different position, the AD carry position, come in and start over Gumayushi, who is the back-to-back world championship winner. And to be fair to Gumayushi, he was probably their best player overall in the entirety of 24. And by probably, I mean he was. Like, he was the most consistent player in 2024. And so he was benched temporarily for an up-and-coming player called Smash. And Smash it was a different meta, to be fair. Gumayushi has always had champion pool issues with certain, like, he just can't play certain champions, and he hasn't been able to do that. And Smash has a champion pool that addresses some of those weaknesses. Gumayushi is still an elite level player. He just doesn't offer the maximum versatility that you might like as a professional team. Now,
Especially
of this aside, yeah, especially with Fearless Draft. That's a great point, Barry, with the changes that were made to the format. Yeah. So T1 comes out with a very strange PR statement coming into spring, which is to say that Gumayushi is being back to the starting roster, and Joe Marsh talked to the coaches, and the implication is that he overruled the coaches to put Gumayushi, because the fans were mad because Gumayushi wasn't there, even though Smash was doing a perfectly good job. Like, and arguably, I would think most analysts would say a better job. And so he says he has overruled the coach's decision, effectively putting Gumayushi back as the starter, and Smash, this other rookie player, is now being like demoted back to the bench. Mm-hmm. And now why they would make this statement publicly is very bizarre. And especially, why would they make it in a way where it implies that Joe Marsh is the right person to be making these roster decisions? And in a way, because SK Telecom finished 5th, 6th place in the latest domestic season, which, to be fair, they were a better team than that. That was the fault of the format.
There was some fuckery. It definitely was. There was.
The format was bullshit. But the thing is that they're still like a top 4 team in Korea. Like, don't get me wrong, but they finished lower than they should have because the format was stupid, and they basically hit a good team, one of the few better teams in that round, and they didn't have double elimination, so it was bullshit. I will defend T1 on that. They were not the 5th, 6th best team. That was ass that they got that place.
Pretty swear, no one, even with a gun to their head, would say the non-gym team was better than them. Nobody would.
Yeah. So basically, the problem is that they're in a situation now where I don't believe they think they can win anymore without Zeus. Like, the roster has been downgraded. And so what Joe Marsh is doing is he's making a decision to appease the fans, because he knows that regardless of whether they play Gumayushi or Smash, they ain't winning shit this year. And
you can also imply, Monty, that in doing that exact move now, you are almost soft scapegoating the rookie player Smash for the reason they came 6th. Yeah.
I mean, there's two things, right? Like, 2 reasons that I see. Like, number one is it's a business decision, right? Like, because
it is.
If they had like a bunch of K-pop, like the K-pop style marketing,
they can't win, so they go K-pop. That's what's going on.
Right, and then they have like merch already made in Gumayushi's name that's just gonna be stuck in a warehouse that they can't sell. So they need to like clear that inventory. So like, if they're essentially,
by the way, shout out to the little African kid right now with the dopest ever T-shirt, ZOFGK. Like, he's got the flyest shit right now. Right next to obviously his Kansas City Chiefs 2024 Super Bowl champions. What it was, whatever that joke would be,
Yeah, but I mean, so like, one is like, it's a business decision when you're publicly putting out a statement that like, I trust in our coaches, but I have to look out for the long-term health of, like, what is exactly a long-term view, ensure the best interests of T1. Then if they're saying that, then they know this is not the move to be a better, like, a competitive roster. This is for some sort of marketing reason, right? That's one. That's reason number one, which is probably what it is. Or number two is like this, like what Monty was implying is he's reading Korean forums and Reddit and then is making roster decisions off of fan sentiment. So could be one or the other, but I mean, the statement implies the first one, that it's a business decision. So
yeah. I mean, I'm still none the wiser as to why this guy is just out there, like, off the leash, just creating all these problems for an organization that he just doesn't seem to be attached to in any kind of meaningful way.
By the way, there's even a part here I could bring up that everyone forgets, which is, even though what's weird is LS himself publicly credits Joe Marsh for saving the situation. If you remember, Monty, as far as I can tell, Joe Marsh already interfered when, like, all those years ago, in like 2020, he basically told LS, like, you can be the coach of T1. I've got fake, I think it was him who did this. I've got fake and a sign off on it. And then there was that big backlash, which is why actually that episode with the crackdown with Bwipo had to be deleted off the internet, because basically then they, like I just said, I'd heard behind the scenes that it wasn't as simple as they didn't want LS. It's that within Korea, people didn't accept the fact that he was both a foreigner and gay. So they didn't want this person to be like essentially pick which one of those you don't like. They found enough people where the Venn diagram was one or the other. So it was implied the Korean side of the org didn't want that to be the case. And I know the fan base certainly was against that. So that's already an example of like a really weird sort of like, again, like Jerry Jones-esque move, which is like, that was, what I don't get is, if you're Joe Marsh, bro, that one maybe I could forgive you for, because it's like a year into being in the org. If you don't know that's not going to play with Koreans, like, are you even talking to Koreans? Like, do you actually, are they all yes men to you? So how can you not get that would play really badly with them?
You know, now that you
would seem
bring
like
it
foreign
up,
interference, you know?
Like, now they bring it up, like, pretty much T1 is the Dallas Cowboys of, like, the esports world. The CEO is out there making public statements, like, willy-nilly, like, no one can rein him in because he's at the top. And then, yeah, except, T1 wins. They won things, unlike the Dallas Cowboys.
Fair. Yeah.
So maybe he is justified. Maybe this is the way to do it. I don't know.
I just can't understand like the benefit to it all. It's like this has generated so much negative attention, and I can't think of
there's no benefit to it.
And I can't think of anything more emasculating than a CEO. Right, you're a CEO, and the organization within which I am a CEO has to come out and gone, yeah, you don't really listen to him. He's sundowning. He's having one of his senior moments, he meant some other agents, like whatever.
He meant abstractly with agencies. This has happened with players where they don't represent the player's best interest. Not in this particular case, because now it's come out that they have a 0% commission, so it's just categorically not true. Also, they completely called their bluff. Yeah. They literally T1. If they're lying, just release the confidentiality clause. Yep. Let us see it. Yep. Let us fucking see it, T1. It's not that hard.
Let's see the medical records, Joe.
If it's a super sick offer, then why can't you release it? You should be proud you made that offer. Yep. It's if it was a good offer, they should release it, because it would be unbelievable that Zeus would turn down this amazing offer.
If it was 2 million and Zeus had taken 1 million, they'd have somehow got that information out there, Monty. I'm with you.
So the rumor I'd heard when I was in Korea this December, and I met up with a couple of former pros that I was close with, they said that the difference was $300,000 per year between the contract.
Plus the player versus team option. That's
yeah. Like, that was the difference. So,
which, by the way, would make it hilarious if, in not paying the 300k, they fucked up their multi-million-dollar ZOFGK marketing strategy. Because again, do you know how to do a basic sum, Joe? Like, certain things have implied value, mate. Maybe learn how poker works or something.
Yeah.
So, it's just funny because I just keep hearing people say EV all the time, and I'm sick of it, man. But yeah, I mean,
this was definitely a negative EV player, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably. It definitely is. But I think it just depends how, the big question in all of this is what exactly did those communications look like between the agency and the team? And it's really hard to make any judgments because you don't know what those communications looked like, right? If the agency was being very clear, hey, you got to meet this number for us to say yes, and then the team didn't want to do it, then the agency's fine. But if they were being very dodgy and being vague about what the situation was, and then suddenly throw out 3 p.m. randomly at 1 p.m. or some weirdness like that, if they weren't being clear and communicating, not out of malice, but maybe they just weren't handling it properly. And if that's the case, then it's maybe the fault is more on the agency side for not being better at communicating. So it's just hard to assign any type of blame, really.
Look, there's also the factor here that everybody might be smoke screening for Zeus. If Zeus just said, I don't want to be on T1 anymore, get me the fuck out.
Yeah.
And they're trying to protect his personal reputation, because that's the job of the agency. Mm-hmm. Especially, by the way, they are financially motivated normally to protect him, but in this contract situation where their value is in his future, it's even more so. He could have just said, fuck T1, I hate T1, they should have made me an offer, this offer is insulting, I don't want to live in Faker's shadow anymore, I want to go forge my own legacy, I have a chance to join the reigning championship team, not T1, by the way, of the domestic league. So I don't have confidence. We almost didn't make Worlds because other players were underperforming on my roster. It's a miracle we won. I don't think we can run that back. But you know who can win? Maybe Hanwha Life with me on it. These are all things he could have said. He could have just not wanted to do it anymore, and everybody else is just making up reasons as to why this wouldn't happen, when the reason could be very simple, and that could just be Zeus's decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But no one wants to say that because obviously Zeus probably still has some T1 fans that are on board with him who might support him in the future. And he's like, I hate T1. I didn't want to be on that team. He loses fans. There's no upside to him doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could be.
And then
could be
T1 just has Faker do a video go, to Zeus.
No, he just shows up in another Samsung ad playing a mobile game. Who knows? Like,
so, and you know, I think that this has been massively overcomplicated, and I don't really understand. You know, it was super suspicious at the time when this was happening because you can apply Occam's razor to the situation and just be like,
both sides probably didn't communicate properly.
yeah, they didn't communicate properly, or Zeus just didn't want to do it, or Hanwha just had a better deal, period, and the better deal was selected, right? How much drama can there possibly be in this scenario unless Zeus or the agency was like willfully malicious, which is especially clear that they were not willfully malicious. Like, we can say that the reporters have gotten involved, we've had investigative journalism done, the gauntlet has been thrown down to release the negotiating information. T1 has not picked it up, so I have to assume that there's something in there that T1 don't want people to see.
I mean, also as well though, even the premise is basically flawed. Like, what was? Hang on, I'm gonna bring up the exact quote he supposedly said. So what was it? It was, there have been past instances where financial gains were prioritized over what's best for the player. Within this context, it sounds like, based on every piece of information we know, that not only were there financial gains for the player, not the negotiating party, that they've said we take 0%, there's no commission, but that's not how we operate as an agency. So there was a clear financial incentive for the player to take this deal. But more importantly than that, and I guess in a roundabout way, if you want to do the logic backwards, you can bring it back to money, but also that the player gets control over the direction of their career by being able themselves to activate an extension.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Yep.
How's any of that not best for the player? Like, real question. Like, more money, better for the player. I mean,
that's where, for me, that's where also, as well as K-popification, that's where T1 starts to sound like Scientology or something. Man. Like, you better stay in. It's
well,
the
that's
best
what
thing
I'm
for
saying.
You too. It's true,
Joe,
you know.
Joe Marsh's implication is that even with more control over your destiny and more money, staying in T1 is somehow the better deal because reasons.
Well, they're going to make you more popular, and then you might be able to monetize on it. I don't know.
Well, which
you get the Twitter. They're paying you in Twitter followers.
Well, which is a lot like the old
they're paying you in exposure.
Exactly.
Classic.
Yeah. Which, I mean, again, if I've just won back-to-back worlds, and the net benefit to staying in the org is you're going to do some weird fucked up K-pop content that's going to make me more popular. So, I don't know, my stream will pop off. Like, nah, guys, I'm going to need more than that. Like, I'm going to need money on the fucking table.
Also,
like, you know what I mean?
The players didn't sign up for that. They signed up to be players, not...
Well, as I said, I hate...
Not get oiled up.
Yeah, exactly. I hate all the idolification bullshit coming out of career with...
Like, I know Chovy isn't into that. No. You know, the most pro players are just fucking nerds who want to play the game. And so they, you know, if you are auditioning for a K-pop group, you're auditioning to do K-pop. That's not what they signed up for when they decided to become professional players. How could anyone
look at the headlines coming out of the K-pop world over the last 5 years and think...
I mean, even recently, the new ones are crazy that have happened the last week.
This is the model we really should be applying to our successful sports organization. Like, you know, to create that kind of fan base that, like, that's not good for any of the players. I mean, we saw this, by the way. We saw it with the Faker headbutt gate. Like, you know, we saw that there was a player there under insane amounts of pressure, like losing his cool in public, didn't hurt anybody, seems to be immensely frustrated with himself. And by the way, that's a public interest story. That video has absolutely every right to be distributed anywhere by any news outlet. Is it to
It happened on a broadcast.
Yeah,
It's not like it was
exactly.
like surreptitious.
No, it was technically filmed like
Yeah.
by someone with a camera inside the arena or
But
whatever.
it was in a public space
That's true.
in the
Yes, it was.
stadium.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
that's
Which,
true.
by the way, it's in your contract, and the fans and the players are alike in this. If you're in that building when that tournament's happened, you've waived your right to
You're
privacy.
gonna be on camera.
Yeah, you've forfeited your right to privacy. So behave. Don't do anything you would want to get picked up, because everyone's got cameras. There's cameras everywhere. There's audio everywhere. You're mic'd up all the time. Don't even say anything. Don't even make that edgy joke, because someone somewhere is recording it. And as we've seen in the dirty world of American politics, that'll just get released when it's convenient. Fuck you over. But people don't think that way. Instead, what ended up happening there was we went into this bizarro world where if you even shared the video, you were just being attacked by swathes of fans. And at no point, by the way, did old mouthy Joe Marsh come out and go, hey, calm down, lads, calm down. Let's not do that. Yeah, let's all keep it fucking cool. You know, Faker lost his temper. It happens. It's not a big deal for people to talk about. There wasn't any of that. In fact, they were very happy to leverage and unleash those demented fucking fans on anyone that was sharing that video. And they sat back and idly thought, well, this is working for us. We'll have this cleaned up in no time. So the irony of the final chapter of where this story's going to go now, where Joe Marsh himself is being essentially hoisted by his own petard of these insane fans, going to be deploy the trucks, get the signs. Joe
And
Marsh
for
has
the
got to go. It's fantastic.
The amount of times that they've like put those, like, you know, brought out the trucks and then said all this, he's still
All right, we have
here.
to explain the trucks because we have non-league viewers.
By the
So
way, I
in
just love the
Korea-
idea.
normal
Actually, it's
fan.
like ask not for whom the trucks are, Joe Marsh. They are for you now. Exactly. I love that. Perfect.
The trucks guys, when we mentioned them, in Korea, part of protest culture in Korea is that there are these trucks that you can rent with like LED, they're like giant LED moving signs. And so for about $400, you can rent one of these trucks, put a digital image on it, and then drive it outside whatever you're mad at. So they will literally send, the T1 fans will pool their money, hire trucks, agree on a message, and then use the message to criticize people, and they will just park them outside of T1 headquarters, the LOL arena where they play. It's very funny. It's super funny. We've thought about renting trucks for our own nefarious purposes at times. We might still do that. But it is an opportunity that the fans have taken, and this is just part of the way that they express their displeasure. So when we talk about the trucks coming, the trucks have come in the past for coaches that they want fired, for, you know, the starting roster that they want to see if a player's been benched. Like the trucks show up. So that's what we're discussing when we talk about
They've sent trucks for Joe Marsh before too. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So like
Yep.
he's still there.
They sure
it's-
have.
it's
I mean, to be fair, they've sent trucks for
everything.
fucking everything.
Yes.
So-
Yes.
I mean, listen, it starts with the trucks, but this, to be fair, it starts with the trucks.
starts with
you
the
know how it
trucks.
goes. You know how it goes. It starts with the trucks, and then it could escalate to a boycott or something. And like, put it this way, they're a fan base crazy enough to do something that could be detrimental to the organization's business. Like, be under no illusion to it. The trucks are just funny. The trucks are just actually pathetic. Like, you just look like a bunch of fucking children, like absolute losers that you're paying out of your own pocket to fucking send trucks in.
That's how strongly they feel about it.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
But also, to be fair, Korean people are very good about boycotting,
Yes.
and it does
Yeah,
work. Like, it's not like the West where they're like, "We're not going to buy your products anymore." When they say that, they mean it, and they all mean it at the same time. So they absolutely do have leverage in the situation,
Because
and
it's
there
a much
is a
smaller
world where
market too. So
it's a much smaller market, but they're also just very good at collective action.
Well, they actually say that in this case, Monty, because remember, this wasn't just trucks. They then put like a fucking flyer, which they even got translated into English, which at the end absolutely is like, it reads like some sort of IRA list of demands, mate. It's crazy. At the end, it even has a real sentence where it says something like, if essentially the gist of this last sentence, which is bolded, goes like, if you ever try this again, like, there will be like a second and third thing happen or something. Which is like,
here it is.
Hello,
T1 cannot exist without fans. But if the club ignores the fans and operates arbitrarily without the fair process, obviously some of this is poorly translated, so that's not me doing it. It is not worth it. This statement is the final warning from the fans. If you don't fulfill your responsibility in this situation, fans will show you. If you want to do this situation with another player, the demonstration will expand to the second and third. T1 CEO takes responsibility for this decision and must immediately withdraw and resign. So basically, they're like, listen, you ever fuck around again, we'll fuck you up. Yeah, there'll be more trucks. There'll be more trucks, obviously.
The translation makes it sound a lot more insane than I think it probably is.
I don't know. I like having seen these fans. I just think they're insane, mate. I just think this is so ridiculous.
I think I'd like to see the original text on that.
Right.
Wait, if I can find it for you, I believe it's written in Korean as well.
Yeah, and I've got the original. You can do a quick scan and tell us if it sounds more hostile and threatening than intended. But I mean, I don't think it is. Like, so.
I mean, yeah.
Look in the group chat there. It's there, Barry. It's in Korean.
Hold on, I'll send it to him.
But anyway, I mean, look, just that there's any fan bases operating like this. Like, I don't look, if you want to do a boycott, if you feel that strongly about it, that's the leverage you have, right? You don't get to make any demands of a private business, dickheads. So skip straight to the boycott and let's see, right? Let's see if you can actually twist the collective arm of the organization. But I detest esports fans. And by the way, this is it's not just limited to.
Gee, Richard, I've never heard you say that before.
I just detest esports fans, mate. So like that's 20 years in the business. But
the saddest thing about this whole thing, Richard, is first of all, for the first 10 minutes, I'm obviously let them fight. But then the sad thing is, it's the one thing that actually has to make me go on bloody Joe Marsh's side, because I don't agree that the fans should have to say over the entire auction.
I've said this
that's
before.
Absurd, isn't it?
Esports fans leverage your boycotts. What's that? Your boycotts probably won't work 'cause you don't pay fuck all anyway. Fine. There you go. Start spending some money. Get yourself some leverage. Get your money up. Get your leverage up. Right? But they don't, and they won't. And I don't know if South Korea and T1 fans are unique in that. Let's see. But you must skip straight to the boycott. Issuing hostage-style letters and fucking demands that, like, people are going to do this. You are not involved in the business. Dear fan, you are a pleb. You matter. You matter when you buy a shirt. You matter when you buy a ticket and turn up to an event. I got nothing but time for those fans. Like, that's why every time I'll work an event, I'm the last one to leave. I'll sign everyone's autograph. I'll do everything. They paid. They bought a ticket. They get to fucking boo. They get to fucking cheer. And they get a fucking signature and a selfie with me if that's what they want, right? They paid money. They have contributed to the ecosystem. Your fucking forum rats who, they won't spend money on a fucking, anything that helps prop up the ecosystem, but they'll get a truck calling you a dickhead. Get the fuck out of my space. Like, you are everything that is awful about it and about esports in general. And I've said this is almost like a riot-ification. It's not just unique to South Korea. One of the things Riot has done with League of Legends broadly is told this lie to the fans that if you're capable of typing up a fucking Reddit thread, which, by the way, will put you in the 1% intellectually of all esports fans out there, right? If you are capable of typing up a Reddit thread, your opinion supposedly counts more than actually paying customers. Well, no, it doesn't, and it never will. And people who co-sign that are scumbags, and they are destroying the industry. They've made it insufferable for everyone that works in it. And Joe Marsh was happy to use these fans for his own end, and now they're coming for him. So enjoy that.
And by the way, this isn't historically the case of T1 fans, by the way. This insanity only started in the last few years. Remember that T1 as an organization, SK Telecom, has existed for, 25 years now? They weren't like this previously. They weren't like this in League of Legends previously. When Faker won his first 3 titles, they weren't like this. The insufferability has come from the K-popification of this, right? And, this whole situation just stinks. And the thing about Mando, our sponsor, is that it can stop the stink before it starts. And I wish that T1 had used a metaphorical version of Mando to stop the stink several years ago, because now we just have to deal with it. And that's not acceptable. And so I would encourage you guys to check out Mando, because they have men's grooming products, whole body deodorant, bar soap, of course. They've got spray-on deodorant, stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, which is like a lotion. They also have options for you, like the wipes.
You can also
that
use
you can
the
wipe
cream on your
yourself down
balls. I'll give one thing: Joe Marsh got massive balls, allegedly.
I was going to say,
maybe you could
sadly,
use some
Mando
Mando.
don't do a baby oil lotion that he could use for some of his players in a calendar.
for owner. There is no, unfortunately, they do not offer sexy oil. That is
We will provide
not
feedback
in
to
their
Mando.
product
Get
catalog.
that. Get on that. Sexy oil that
But
smells nice.
if you guys are are looking to try some new products, I really like them. I like the Clover Wood scent myself. They have manly scents. They have a starter pack that's great for new customers. Comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, like a mini body wash or deodorant wipes, and free shipping. The deodorant wipes are actually great, especially if you're out somewhere like you're camping or you need to freshen up before you go out in the evening. It's really wonderful. As a special for our listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code HORSEMEN, plural, MEN, at shopmando.com, shopmando.com. Please support our show. Tell them we sent you. Code HORSEMEN. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. Great product. We appreciate
And it can
that.
block odor for up to something like 72 hours, which is a much more
Yep.
reasonable
And it's also
deadline
aluminum
than
free,
saying
which I
you have to be
appreciate.
free by 3 p.m. on a Saturday, whatever it was.
I absolutely hate how pleased with yourself you were with that segue. You were so.
I can't lie.
One of his
pleased
better
with
ones.
Normally,
yourself.
Barry, I can see that. Normally, I can see those coming a mile away. He got me though. When I wondered where he was going on that.
Yes,
thing.
finally.
He switched it at the last second. He did get me on that one. You know.
But it's true. I wish T1 had used Mando to stop the stench of their terrible fan base that they've developed, because I mean it's a problem, and they don't do anything to rein these fans in either. When they went crazy on LS for him being gay, did they say anything?
Nope.
No. And LS is confused. He's like, well, they've always been really nice to me. Yeah, dude, because the negative PR of them not being super nice to you after the incident of you being gay came out, the optics of that with the Western fan base would have been terrible. So you know what they did? Joe Marsh played it up, made you very complimentary of him, so that in the East, they actually didn't have to deal with their fans who hated you because you were gay. And in the West, you can do PR for them and you are friendly and it looks like it's totally fine. So there's no issue. Like, there are always ulterior motives here. And sure, LS and Joe Marsh might have a legitimate friendship, but the fan base that has been created by T1 has been extremely hostile, has been psychotic on the internet. They have become possibly the worst League of Legends fan base in history.
Here's what's
And they're
funny.
competing with
Well,
like OG, TSM, and Fnatic
I was
fans.
gonna say.
And they might right now be the worst.
Well,
They
here's
are
the
horrible.
thing. Again, the T1 org themselves, their own actions imply their fans are actually terrible and on a level you haven't seen from normal fans. Because here's one thing that I could have laughed myself to sleep when, in T1's attempt to sort of like put the fire out of this Joe Marsh shit, they said something along the lines of like about how it's important to have free expression, in this case to allow Joe Marsh to say any old shite. Because if you know anything about Korean orgs, in Korea, it's not like in America, guys, where you can say some very incendiary things, and in theory, like, you could go all the way to the Supreme Court and you have the freedom of speech to say those things because it's the Second Amendment or whatever. What people don't seem to understand...
First Amendment.
First one.
First Amendment.
First Amendment, whatever. I'm not American, Barry. If it was up to you, you would have no amendments, dickhead. So anyway, right? So that's that. I've now got all our cards on the table. So anyway, the point is...
Was not
what people
expecting
don't
that
seem-
one today.
What people don't seem to realise...
The British imperialism. It always shows up.
What
Anyway,
people
continue.
don't seem to realise is this. Not only T1 themselves, look this up. Where T1 said that they were going to sue fans who'd said rude things about Faker. And if anyone wants to know a blast from the past, about 10 years ago, something like that, when Slayers was around, that team in StarCraft 2 with Boxer, and if you remember, his wife was like a famous actress, Jessica something or other, they also were suing fans back then who said things about Jessica, or I think it was even like Toss Girl, that female StarCraft player. Basically, if a fan did something mean, 4chan level behavior, I think what they did with those people was they would take like a porn star and like Photoshop your head on it or whatever and post it on right in the West. That would just be some stupid 4chan behavior, like, oh, ignore them, they're just toxic fans. You can get sued for that for real in Korea, and you might actually have to lose the case. What would you say about that, Barry? It's like a real thing, right?
I don't. Well, they'll threaten to sue. They'll definitely threaten to sue. I don't think
they do.
I don't think anything's actually gone like there's been actual like resolutions.
I know they're threatened, but I don't know whether I don't know if anything was went to prison or paid. But anyway, my point is they clearly don't believe in freedom of speech in the sense that a Westerner might put it up.
Yeah. It's also they can find you too because your social security number is linked to your forum accounts a lot of the time. So I do know cases where people have been sued for posting slander. And the thing about Korean defamation laws is why the press isn't necessarily as free in Korea is because you can be sued and you can win defamation cases against people who are telling the truth because it reflects on your reputation.
Because it's not necessarily defamation. It's called 명예훼손, which means damage to honor is the literal translation. So
some would argue T1 should sue Joe Marsh.
Well, so by the way, I did take a look at this the original text. It's not as insane as Richard's translation as
not my translation.
Richard,
no,
that's not my translation.
You were reading. I'm sorry. The translation you were reading.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. It was not as insane as that, but it is incredibly strongly worded. Like
sounds pretty insane.
Strongly worded.
That a group of fans are issuing strongly worded statements demanding what the CEO of a private company does.
Demand number 1: T1 CEO Joe Marsh. It
does still say yes to resign, though, right?
It essentially says he must make an official apology and immediately resign.
I love it.
The official apology
good,
plus the resignation.
So I'll just keep my 6 figure
salary. So it is incredibly strongly
fans.
worded.
So do your little boycott. See what happens. Like it's simple as that. Like I'm on your side, T1 fans. If you've got the leverage to do it, do it. But if you're just going to send these trucks and hostage demands, this is dumb. Like,
I don't know. I will say, like, when like this whole thing like started, and I was like kind of like cursorily looking at it, it did feel a lot like sour grapes on like the org's end.
Of course it is.
Which it is. But then like actually like when I like started reading more into it, like I could see some like places where like there's like if you apply Occam's razor,
let's do it.
you see,
Let's do it.
I mean, I told you, right? Well, I told you it's like maybe there was like poor communication. Like they didn't communicate properly in terms of like what the deal was on the table, right? Like that is the main sticking point for me, right? Like they're probably like maybe the agency did handle it poorly, but then at the end of the day, they did right by Zeus, which is all that really matters at the end of the day. They got him the best deal possible. So it's just like it's one of those things. Like I've had situations like this happen, and then like in the past, but then like it never goes public like this. It's very weird that it went this public. Like it's just I think most like the org owners I've like dealt with in the past like just would rather just like talk behind my back to other org owners and then talk shit to their players, like never work with this agent, he's gonna fuck you over. They'd rather do that than like go out publicly. So I don't know which is better, honestly, in that case. Is it better that they go public and then kind of like show their hand, or be more insidious behind the scenes? So that's been my experience in general.
I mean, it's like Duncan said. He made the point earlier that if they've got cards to play, if they know, you just leak it to a journalist. Super easy. We know how the fucking sausage gets made here, boys. Like we fucking, You just link it to Inman.
But it's weird. That's why, to me, here's also a weird thing to me. I never ever put any stock, Barry, in the idea T1 was actually going to sue this agency. Because again, to me, that's not the thing that you shout from the rooftops. You do the bloody court case first. Like, the last thing you're going to do is let some Western CEO pop off and give a million crazy statements that can all be used in court. Like, to me, that's an example of like the bark's worse than the bite. The whole reason you're doing like, hey, I might sue you. It's like what you were saying earlier about the fans. You're more just threatening the fan in the hopes he then stops doing the things. You don't have to go and sue him for being an arsehole, right? To me, that's what really played badly. The idea that you're going to say everything publicly, but then go and do the case. It's like, maybe, but it seems like kind of a tactical misplay.
I mean, maybe they suspected tortious interference, right? Like, essentially, well, maybe the agent was going around talking to teams and then getting, like, deal terms.
Yeah, but the only grounds for that would be if you had a private deal with the other org. Then,
right.
Sure.
But then,
yeah.
Because in this case, what tortious interference would look like in this specific situation is if the agency had gone to Hanwha before the contract deadline was up without permission from T1, talked to him, had those deal points ready, and then like they said, like, because from T1's perspective, maybe they thought that like, oh, it's suspicious that they had this all ready, like right away, ready to go the next day. Like, maybe that's their perspective. That's why they're threatening to sue, because they were like, they thought there was a legitimate tortious interference situation. What I don't get is, why would you ever do that? Because that's something you want to do. Like, you want to leave yourself the option to do that to other players. You want to poach players too. So, like, if you're the one that opens a can of worms and now you have teams suing each other over tortious interference, like, it's just never going to end well.
But it's the reason why, to give you a quick Western example, even though Fnatic did the same thing, Barry, when they lost a few times, when the player would just go elsewhere, they would always go, bloody G2's poaching. And I always told people, don't ever expect to ever see a lawsuit, because spoiler, Fnatic and all the other orgs poach too. What they're really mad about is you just did it better than me, so since no one knows behind the scenes we all do it, I'll just say you're the one doing it. Like, again, it's the same. To me, it ends the second you hit send tweet. Well, you know what I mean? That's you've already done your action against them.
It's also that T1 as an org has never had to deal with players potentially wanting to go somewhere else before, because it was always like, why would you not come here? T1 is straight up the most prestigious esports org in the history of esports. They've been around the longest. They've been incredibly successful in a variety of titles. They had tons of the StarCraft 1 Bonjois on their roster. They are by far the most prestigious League of Legends team to have ever existed. They are not used to being told no at any point in time. You always had Faker there to draw in the best players. T1 throughout history of League of Legends, whenever a player has a big rise in the scene, they go join T1 and they play with Faker and they win titles, right? They've won an obscene amount of domestic titles, not recently, obviously. Like, they've been actually very unsuccessful domestically, but they've been in 3 back-to-back world championships. They've won, or they've back-to-back world championships. They've been in the finals, and then they've won the last 2. So they've been really successful on the international stage at Worlds, less so at MSI. But you know, I think this is an instance where they were shocked because someone actually fucking said no for the first time in a long ass time. And it was an ego thing to a certain degree within people, you know, with people of that org. It's not like Joe Marsh knows it. Faker was around in T1 well before Joe Marsh came in. Joe Marsh was gifted not only the greatest player in League of Legends history, but also the greatest magnet for talent. And also he had 2 massive companies and the personal interest of a billionaire to fund his efforts. They didn't have to be sustainable. So he's not used to losing because he has literally had every advantage that could possibly be given to him. Infinite money. Infinite, the best player. Like, this is the easiest GMing job of all time. And even still, he has managed to not win domestically, almost not make worlds, do things like run a 10-player roster that was a fucking comprehensive disaster while it was going on. I mean, this could have been done better, and there's every single advantage to T1. So I think the people at T1 simply are not used to being in this situation, and they just erupted publicly when the bad things finally happened to them. How do you think other orgs felt historically about T1 just coming in and snaking their best players?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of the boots on the other foot. I still don't think the Korean side of T1, as far as I can tell, all they've done is handle negotiations pretty poorly. We have to put the negotiations actually on them because, as everyone now has admitted, Joe Marsh never had anything to do with negotiations at any point.
As CEO,
it's happening in a language he doesn't speak.
Well, as CEO, he would have to at least approve the deal terms. If it's like
but he also
related.
The player's saying he was
as
never
I said previously with T1, Joe Marsh also. Yeah, Joe Marsh also has to assume that he is getting accurate information from his own employees because it's happening in a language he doesn't speak. And he's, as far as we know, not even in the same country while this is happening.
Yeah. I mean, that's also got to be said. Like, listen, I know Korean is a hard language to just pick up, but I mean, like, you got money. Yeah.
It's been
not to negotiate. Like, you can learn.
That's so complicated, man.
Not for a business negotiation type where you want to be. Very
my
clear.
my wife is Korean American and is bilingual, and she couldn't do this in Korean. There's too many technical vocab she just doesn't know. It's all the business like technical vocabulary. She couldn't do this at all.
I could. But no, I mean, well,
you also work as a player agent and have more interest
here's the real thing.
Like, learning these terms.
There's a guy at T1 called that does speak fluent Korean and English. There's like he's essentially the de facto kind of like the link between like the Western leadership and then the Korean staff there, and he's been around there for a very long time. And generally, he's pretty good with players in general. And I would imagine he would have to have been involved at some capacity because in my guess on that workflow is essentially if there's a deal that's being made and if they receive a counter proposal to like match, then like that has to run up the chain to Joe Marsh at some point because it is going to run into.
They probably shouldn't have fucked around with a bunch of bullshit offers then if time was a factor.
But I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like there's probably something in that workflow that needs to be streamlined. So
well, also it's just that if something weird, what I don't understand about Joe going off publicly about this stuff is that if something like I wouldn't do it because I would be afraid of information coming out. Because if there's something that happened that you don't know about because the people, maybe somebody fucked up and they're trying to cover it up. Why are you flying off the handle publicly when you could just look like an idiot later because the information will come out where one of your subordinates fucked up?
Maybe he is supposed to be the public whipping boy.
Well, you think that's actually the secret role?
Maybe he's.
They're like.
It's not that.
Maybe
it's not that calculated.
Maybe he's the guy.
Yeah,
that's like
Joe, we're gonna need you
that
to
would
say
be
something.
Maybe he has a secret
unbelievably
humiliation
again.
fetish.
Yeah, see, Barry, I agree that would be a good strategy if it was an actual strategy, but because Joe Marsh just does random shit publicly that is negative PR that has no net benefit and seems impulsive, I just apply Occam's razor and think that he is impulsive in his public statements. I think that's just how it is.
Maybe
it doesn't seem calculated.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the fact that
enough.
you even just assumed that the agency wouldn't like come out and push back at all on this seems so crazy.
Yeah, they did call them
they have to. They absolutely have to. I mean, like,
yeah.
Oh no, they have to protect their reputation.
Like, why would a player like, oh, are you that organization that fucking got accused of like not caring about your client's well-being by T1 and you said nothing about that? Yeah, I ain't signing with you. I'm signing with that other agency, you know.
No, with like, especially if you're operating in Korea, you talk with like as an agent, you talk with the player's parents. Since the parents have been like reading stuff online about how this agency is like not acting in the player's best interest, like that is like the parents would be like maybe, and they know nothing about gaming and esports, and they'll be like, you shouldn't go with them because like there's bad press, like they seem suspicious. So like that it probably did do real harm to these people, to this agency. So they need to set the record straight. Like I don't blame them for doing that.
So yeah, I don't know. Like it just there's too much weirdness here, and even if the agency was doing something, it doesn't seem like what they did was actively malicious, is what this comes down to. It could have been partially incompetence, but the reaction seems to be a knee-jerk reaction of sour grapes from T1, which is what we suspected from the beginning. But if they're not willing to correct the record, and they also got things, as far as we can tell, factually wrong, such as accusing the agency of setting the 3 p.m. deadline, Hanwha Life, if they didn't do it, why wouldn't they just come out and say it? And by the way, it's totally reasonable that Hanwha would set the deadline.
Duncan, your mic is muted.
Joe Marsh himself literally said in the AMA, I have a great relationship with Hanwha, and implied that he knew that they didn't say it. So that's why actually Hanwha themselves basically agreeing they did is a big fucking deal to me. You know, it's actually crazy, that detail,
Because if Joe Marsh said, well, Hanwha said to me they didn't do it, first off, Joe, your rivals aren't necessarily going to tell you the truth every time, buddy. Especially when you're both negotiating for the same
I've got a
player,
great relationship
they don't
with my closest rivals. Like, no, you don't, mate. you don't. Like, it doesn't matter if you can go in like to a room afterwards and have a glass of wine and a catch up. Like, it's fucking business, you dickhead. Like,
as soon as he says that, mate, I just want to get that DJ Khaled. Congratulations, you played yourself. Of course, it's ridiculous. Same as I even said at the time, by the way. I didn't have any inside info. This is just one of those ones from the outside. You just learn who the dickheads are and how they fuck up every time. So when he even said that whole thing of like, and they didn't even make a counter proposal, the free agency period's begun. I'm under no obligation to go. Here's how much I'd like you to offer. Like, it's a bidding war, you fucking moron. That's how it works. Like, here's the thing. You tell me your offer, I go and get their offer. That's how it works. Like, I don't have to come back to you. Like, well, here's the thing. I know they might offer 2 million, but if you just give me 1.5, we'll just say deal done right now. Like, it's a free agency period again. Like, this is that. Even the way that was bid, because by the way, fans did pick that part up and run with it and make it seem like something crazy sinister. Like, no counter proposals. That's just unprofessional. I remember just thinking, why would I bid against myself? Like, what even is this?
The whole thing's like just so absurd. I mean, the good news is actually for once, when we're talking about League of Legends, at least the players made out like a bandit, right? I'm fucking happy for that. Like,
no, he did it. He got the bag.
I mean, the funny thing is that he probably would have gotten more money several years ago, but because the market is smaller now, the fact that he's getting paid 2 billion Korean won is probably a small amount of money, because players in his position previously would have gotten paid 2-3 times that. Honestly, like, this is not, in my mind, this is a very reasonable contract for how good of a player he is. He's an elite level player, probably one of the top 5 players in the world right now. And these players don't come along very often. And to get one at that price, I think is not a bad deal for Hanwha, honestly.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing, like you said, it doesn't make sense. If their marketing strategy revolved around Zeus, like, and keeping the same players, or if they're like kind of like actually thinking about how, like, roster construction, you want to lock down your solo lanes as soon as possible, and then the marketing side. So if they don't have it, they didn't lock him down soon enough. That's their fault at the end of the day.
Here's why I really do just think, based on my reading of all the statements, that it really is just some bizarre thing where T1 even still didn't believe in the long-term future of Zeus and wouldn't just give him the 2-year contract. I think that was just the entire sticking point, was the 2 years, and they, in their own statement, make it clear they put 1. Because even in their statement at the end, by the way, they're sort of saying, like, even if it had been for more money, maybe we could have matched for 1 year. They keep doing that. For some reason, the 1 year is some crazy sticking point for them. The reason why I'll bring up why I don't think it can be the case that Zeus just wanted to leave anyway, which is actually what some people did think in this offseason, and he just wasn't interested in staying T1. Because if you look at the timeline of when it's basically they began their negotiations with Zeus, as we're saying, they had like at least a week of the whole thing where he was under contract still and it's not in free agency. Here's what happens if you really want to leave and you really aren't like considering T1 as your top option. During that week before free agency, you say, actually, is it possible before free agency these 3 LPL teams can talk to me? That, as far as we can tell, didn't happen. What happened is at the very end, right before free agency, Zeus's agents and Zeus potentially through them were like, right, actually, this negotiation hasn't worked to our liking so far, so we're going to test free agency and then we'll get back to you. That sounds actually quite plausible, because as I say, there was actually a story that did happen before he was signed, which some people said that I think it was JDG or something. There was a couple of teams where people said that he potentially could have gone to the LPL. If you just wanted a flat out bidding war to get the bag, you don't just do one Korean rival and it depends who gets signed first, or it's musical chairs and there's no spots left, and you have to take whatever's left, like Thorin. You do it where you get as many people involved as possible. You'd want like 5 LPL teams. You'd want Team Liquid involved. You know, you'd get as many people as you get as many bidders to the auction as it were. So then you can get a crazy number for whoever you sign for. So I think my reading of between the lines of it all is, I think it's certainly possible there might have been communication breakdowns to T1. But one, I think this is like a masterclass in how not to handle this sort of an off-season, like re-signing of a big-name player that you need to have for marketing purposes. And then on the Zeus side, I think it is totally plausible. He was totally open to being in T1 again. I'll also throw this out there. One reason I don't think Korean players go as crazy with the free agency as Westerners is, they also, just like you said about how moving to China is a big upheaval, it's also a big upheaval to move from one team you've been in for all these years, where you go to the office all the time, you know all the players. It's not like the West, where in Western sports, you absolutely will go and join another team tomorrow, and then another team 2 years after that. Look at all the NBAs and the superstar people in the NBA have done. They've made all teams and fucked up squads over and over again. I get the vibe, if they'd have offered Zeus this 2 years and a similar money, he would have just said yes and it would be over. So I actually do think this is like T1 thought, we own this guy, and besides, we're T1, who the fuck would ever leave us? And also, who the fuck are you to come in and get this guy a deal elsewhere? And they thought, not only should we win the deal, but when they didn't, they then threw all the toys out the pram, like, well, because we'll make you look really bad because we're T1 and we have all the fans. It's just that's the reading argument.
You want to hear my theory about
Go
this?
on.
Faker's contract is up at the end of 2025, so they didn't want to sign for more than a year. Well, they had the 1+1, but they didn't want to sign for a player option. They wanted to sign for a year plus a year team option, because if they don't re-sign Faker, we know Faker has been injured, even though he does look better now. Who knows if that's going to be a factor? But with the new luxury tax, how much are they going to have to pay Faker to stay? Will Faker retire? Will Faker sign with another team? Perhaps Faker tries to go get more money somewhere else, even though he's got plenty of money. I don't think money is Faker's number one concern, and never has been as a player, and he doesn't need it. It never was, and he doesn't need it. So I assume he'll re-sign with T1, but it becomes a question of how does the luxury tax work in that situation? But in a world where Faker's contract expires and he doesn't go back to T1, what are T1's options? It was already announced that Chovy has signed a 3-year deal with Gen G, so presumably they can't get Chovy without paying Gen G a bunch of money or trading players. And do they have to just start a development roster at that point? Do they have to hit the reset button on T1? Do they want to be on the hook for a bunch of player salaries? I think they wanted to run this back also because they know it was a miracle they won back-to-back world championships. It's not likely it was going to be a third time in a row. It's not likely.
They do have
right?
owner until 2026, I think it looks like.
Sure, yeah. He's the only one on the longer-term contract. But I think they wanted to align Zeus's contract with Faker so that they would have the most options depending on what Faker did after this 2025 season, which makes sense for them. But why does that make sense for Zeus?
Yeah, of course not.
Why? But I think that's what they were trying to do, if I had to guess, because you don't want to be committed in that way if Faker
That's the
leaves.
part I don't get, Monty. This is where me and T1 have a totally different... Whether I could be wrong, I'm a layman. They could be totally different conception of League of Legends. Because here's the funniest thing, Monty. If I know in a year from now I might not have Faker and I'm starting over, do you want to know who my first player I'd like to start over with is? Zeus, for fuck's sake. Like,
right.
He can play all style.
Faker...
Like, I don't get it, mate.
But
they're making it sound like it really has to be ZOFGK or it's not good or something. I don't get that part.
I think the problem is that obviously they'd like to have Zeus if Faker retires, but if Faker continues to play with the team and and he needs more money, and Zeus's contract is too big, and they don't want to pay $1 million, $1 bazillion in luxury tax, they may have a problem of having both Zeus and Faker on giant contracts.
I like the way this is, like, at the end, we're just on some fucking Faker is the God Emperor from Warhammer 40k, and we're just sacrificing great players, like Psychers or whatever the fuck
mean,
he is.
yeah,
continue to work from the Golden Throne and win worlds.
He's the corpse god.
Hold back the Chinese hordes and gene stealers. Fucking hell.
Jesus Christ. you went in deep on that one, Jesus.
Yeah, it's the forces of chaos, right? But it is. I think that's probably what they were thinking.
Obviously,
about.
Joe Marsh himself has been a little bit influenced by Sledge with the comments about order. Yeah. It's going deep on the law here.
So like, I just think that's probably their consideration. I do think that it probably overpowered reason in this situation. Like you're saying, I don't think it's the right justification, but I do think it was a concern for them. And that's probably why it resulted in the negotiations that it did.
Not an unreasonable justification if it was one. It's not unreasonable. It's not the right one, I guess.
That's fair. Yeah.
Right. I agree with that. But it certainly would have been on their minds because it's just impossible to know what Faker's going to do. Or, I mean, Faker almost, had a career-ending injury, basically, where he had to take time off, and the team looked significantly worse without him. So there's also, I mean, look, there have been a million questions about whether Faker even finishes his career as a mid laner. Does he switch to jungle or support? Right?
I think he should become CEO.
Maybe you should.
Hey, the only thing that makes this whole story just get even juicier is if Hanwha wins Worlds. That's just that's the only reason I'd be watching Worlds.
By the way, the saddest thing to me is this is one time I wish we were like this was just a story in America. Because the other thing is as well, with what an honor-based culture Korea is, I don't think even when Zeus retires, he says anything rude about this night. He probably just sits on this forever, especially because he's won so far. Like if this was in the West, mate, by now someone would have said something stupid.
You've had like 5 twit-longers.
Course. Someone would have sort of really revealed like the
someone would have leaked it for
whether
50 subs on a
fact,
Twitch stream.
Yeah. Or even just like when you win the split, you just make a spicy comment in your interview after you win. Like, oh, I guess Hanwha Life believed in me, and that's why I won the split. You do something, you do some shot across the bow. Sadly, I don't think we're ever going to get that. Not least by the way because it is T1. Like, you don't want to go against the monolith of T1 if you ever want to work in Korean esports again.
I know your guys is like last episode was about TFT. Like in TFT when Disho won Worlds, he literally called out Riot in his winners interview.
Right.
It was great.
Yeah.
That was the guy at Frodan referenced,
Yeah. So
shout out to him. What a legend.
Yeah. You gotta do it sometimes.
Mate, I would even love that if some actual like fucking Asian player just won World Tour. Like fuck Riot. Like imagine, can you even imagine that they just said that on the mic, like right in front of all like Mark Merrill?
Mark Merrill's too busy working on another Arcane spin-off. He's a TV executive now. You won't see him.
Okay.
He hasn't got time for the game.
Oh, by the way, did anyone see? I don't want to make the tangent too
thing?
big. It's actually implied that fighting game thing might get canned as well or something like.
Wait, really?
So there's two things we should talk about. So 2XKO, the fighting game,
the worst name.
So by the way, guys, we have to contextualize.
It's double
this worst
knockout,
game ever.
technically double knockout.
Okay.
But you're supposed to say 2XKO. That's how you're supposed to say it. They've said that. If it was
What,
double knockout, it would have
Okay.
been better. So by the way, guys, the reason why it's called 2XKO is because it's a tag team fighter where you play. It's like Marvel versus Capcom, where you have multiple characters. In this case, 2, because you win by guess what, guys? 2X.
Surely they're going to have a huge stable.
They have announced now. Yeah. Surely you're gonna have a lot of
After
characters.
all, you have all the League of
to
Legends
pick from because you would want you have all you have 170 League of Legends champions plus characters from Arcane that aren't even champions yet. But you would think, well, you would need a lot because if you're playing 2 characters every time, then you need a much larger cast of fighting characters in order to fill this out. Like Marvel versus Capcom, you have to have a lot of options. Actually, they've announced that despite the fact that this game has been in development for 9 years, because Riot bought a studio that was making a fighting game, and then they had to redo this fighting game over and over and over again. So 9 years of development on this game, and it has now been announced that the starting roster of characters will be 10 for a tag team. 10 characters, which would be low for a 1 versus 1 fighting game. I think the latest iteration of Street Fighter started with 18, and then they've released new ones as seasons go on, as they do in Street Fighter. And Riot said they're going to release new characters, but God knows how long that's going to take. So literally 2XKO, whenever it comes out, 10 characters, which is terrible for a game that has been in development that long. And to what Barry was saying, the other fun leak coming via the Vietnamese League of Legends scene, because Riot is apparently scouting filming locations and they've been doing it in Vietnam, is that they are going to be starting I can't even get this out without laughing, live action League of Legends prestige television series.
Who deserves a dire play in this one?
Yeah, exactly. Who, which, you know,
or is it Rachel Zegler or whatever?
Is going to be.
Did they go for the end, Monty?
Is going to be based off of Bilgewater, which is their pirate island thing, and they're planning on filming it in Vietnam. Which, by the way, you have to remember that in Bilgewater, League of Legends lore is so trash. One of the primary characters is a character called Miss, as in nice to meet you, Miss Fortune, who obviously was named as a fucking pun and a joke because they never thought that this intellectual property would be used for serious content. So they were just memeing when they made characters. So now we have to deal with an actual human being being called Misfortune and a pirate named Gangplank. Like, literally, the IP is so fucking bad that you can't even have believable characters. And it works it worked in Arcane and animation, first off, because they ignored the lore, but second off, because it's animation. Having somebody walk around in Misfortune wears like a pirate barmaid blouse with like
Pirate
giant
wench.
tits.
Yeah, pirate wench.
Yeah, she's like a pirate wench. So if you want to be true to this, you're going to have somebody just like walking around in like what is effectively a cartoon sex outfit.
Your terms are acceptable, Monty.
Like, with Jinx, when they made it, when they adapted Arcane, like Jinx wasn't wearing her stripperific outfit either. So like,
right.
I mean,
what I don't get as well is, to me, there's lots of really great characters they could do better properties with, Monty. I've got a few ideas. Maybe you could take Rengar and you could do like a whole separate movie where it's sort of like an alien.
No,
and it's like hunting people.
They don't
on
want to deal
planets.
with the furries, man.
Then you could take Kha'Zix and you could have a movie where that's like a horror thing set in space where there's just one Kha'Zix and there's like a crew that can't like defend against it. I've got all sorts of ideas, Mike. There's a lot of original content and IP out there. You know?
We are literally going to have a live action show where these are the names of the characters. By the way, Misfortune, Gangplank, Twisted Fate.
That's not too bad as like a nickname. These are nicknames, though.
If it was an animated show, the suspension of disbelief would be there.
Okay.
But the problem is you can't have the suspension of belief when it's literally two actors talking to each other. It's going to be super janky. And also, just the cost of making this is going to be astronomical. Famously, by the way, as we talk about, we're going into our movie stuff right now. So the reason why we never saw a sequel to Master and Commander is because trying to film on ships is crazy expensive because you have to have real ships, like sailing ships,
if it helps,
crewed, sailing around.
No, they weren't sailing around. It was a set that was floating. It was a floating set.
No, they had real ships too in Master and Commander. They used real ships.
Did they really? I thought it was like a, I thought it was
yes,
a flat.
yes. You can go visit those ships.
That's crazy.
The surprise was an actual tall ship that they used for many of the shots.
I love that movie so much.
It's a great movie. But like Pirates of the Caribbean, famously gigantically expensive films to make.
Anything involving water is ridiculous.
Yeah.
If it helps,
so,
Monty,
look, it's going to be super expensive to make
Misfortune's real name is Sarah Fortune. So, of course.
That was retcon, by the way.
That was retcon.
Gangplank still doesn't have a name. He's just the saltwater.
Exactly.
By the way, we can obviously insert the regular joke that everyone likes to just pretend isn't a thing in League of Legends, which is, don't worry, guys, when they make these live action properties, if you go to Saudi Arabia / the Middle East or Asia, certain characters won't be gay.
Twisted Fate and Graves.
The Twisted Fate episode.
I know in America, you would think that would... You would claim that is an opinion formed by hate, but literally the company themselves will censor that information.
I didn't even think about that. What happened to that Arcane episode, like in season 2 in China?
Oh, haven't you seen the Chinese cuts of that, by the way, Barry? They literally delete the lesbian sex scene and the final scene with Caitlyn and Vi, where like they're leaning on each other's shoulders. They just erase one of the characters. It's fucking hilarious.
I didn't know that.
Literal erasure. Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah, it is. It is literal erasure. Like you can literally go look that up, and it is not in the Chinese version of Arcane.
Damn.
Basically, League of Legends trapped in the closet. That could be the title of a Substack piece.
Oh my lord.
Yeah, it's true. Riot also
and
famous for
I'll bet
their
R.
treatment
Kelly's
of women,
Trapped
like
in the
R. Kelly.
Closet series is probably better than what this will be. That was actually fire. Unintentionally, so I will say. But tell you what, that was fire. I definitely rewatched those many times while high.
I don't like how hard you're laughing at your own joke.
Me, the devil, well, get the fuck out of my career, mate. We haven't been following the last 20 years.
This whole thing.
I'm my own hype man. That's the joke. I think it was Richard's joke. Richard's joke was one of my personalities.
Yeah,
He's also
exactly.
the hype
Basically,
man for the
Duncan has
name.
that split personality.
Is that how you fill the
Yeah,
existential hole within
like-
you?
Exactly. Yes, I do. I'm not Polish, mate, so don't have a problem with that.
But regardless, like we had to bring this up because it's just incredibly funny.
Yeah, of course.
And look, how long is this going to take to make? Look, it's rumored, right? This hasn't been confirmed.
Oh,
It's
by the
been
way, there's
leaked
also
through
another
Vietnamese
detail.
sources.
There's also an update. We should definitely mention this. Guess what? You know, in that last episode, one of the main points of contention is how can Riot sort of say this is a closed case? We've already reviewed it all. There's no evidence. They've now
On the
literally
theatre,
recanted their position, guys, walked it back and gone, we sort of did find some evidence. One of the things they claim as to what the new evidence is that they claim they didn't have recordings of the guy's actual PC and the things from his POV. They were going off other
Immediately.
things.
They didn't have it immediately.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing, Barry. Forget you may as well be a fucking double agent, you fucker. What are you talking about? We're not in court right now, mate. I'm not on the stand. I can say whatever the fuck I want. Secondly, we are saying that immediately. There's no immediately. They said the case was closed, mate. There was no evidence. You can't go as a lawyer. There is no evidence. Oh, sorry,
now that we've got the
I
evidence,
was still looking, but I found some. Like,
Also, the evidence existed.
You know.
The evidence existed. They just didn't review it before making their ruling.
Even though that ruling was huge, like that was a really big fucking. I mean, they even themselves in the explanation, remember, were like, we won't be doing this for future kit. They went out of their way to like give all these reasons to why it wasn't a problem. By the way, I don't even follow that game, so I don't even know the specifics whether it was Winter or not. It's just all the experts were saying it was, you know.
He threw on purpose, and you're not allowed to do that. Whether he was doing it specifically, knowing, like.
I do think it's good though that they did recant their position. I also want to say that I appreciate. Yeah, it's more than they've ever done for anything in League of Legends. It was good. Also, I appreciate the fact that the person who is the head of competitive TFT made a video with their face in it,
and said,
talking about
we messed up. Bro. He says that.
Yeah, like we criticize them because what they do is they release these rulings and it's never anybody's responsibility. Yes. And this guy, Mykles Sherman, owned up to it. Like, credit to him. Like, they did. I'm not going to get mad at Riot because I think they did address it. And like, sure, it was stupid the way they did it at first, but for the first time ever, they actually fucking did something and somebody put their name and face on it. So like, credit to them. That's, I hope that continues. It won't because people are pussies, but like
esports has been generally better than like,
yeah. Well, that's also because Mortdog is like a very forward facing developer.
I don't think he touches esports as much as people think.
No. But I'm just saying the precedent has been set by the dev team in that game. Because Mortdog is like really public about the development of the game and the decisions that are being made. And Riot, to be fair, since Freak joined the Balance team, has been more doing that in the League of Legends side as well, which I think is good. Like, these are all things that I think are good that Riot is doing. And I hope that those kind of competitive rulings actually have people's fucking names and faces and attach them and are reasonable, and that they're willing to go back and correct mistakes that they made. These are all good things.
Mm-hmm. I definitely do not remember seeing names on the competitive ruling that involved you. Definitely do not remember the names there.
But nope. And I mean, I revealed the names, obviously, because I had all the communications that I dumped with them that were non-communications. But it was just all of, it's not just me. It's like everything in history. There's never anybody's name on a decision unless they decide to trot Mark Zimmerman out there to be the mouthpiece for decisions he doesn't make, which is also fucked up in its own way.
Yeah.
Let's do some quick viewer question, guys. We just haven't done viewer questions on the Four Horsemen. And I know we've been trying to say, like, we'll create this other content, obviously, right? But we've just been working on some other stuff with the business. So it's time to just do a couple of these. We'll do some for Richard because, he doesn't typically get this. So for Richard, with Tom Brady becoming a part owner of the Raiders, is this some alchemical balance for the Saudis buying
It's actually just as bad. In many ways, because fuck New England, obviously. I mean, look, I'm obviously a bit of a Brady stan in terms of what he did in his career and everything. Me and Duncan have always had that back and forth about Rodgers and Brady, but I mean, I like, you have to understand, he's always been this weird character around the franchise. Like, he nearly played for us before he went, down to the Bucks. We nearly had him. So I don't know what his fascination is with the Raiders org, what the Raiders org fascination is with Tom Brady. But I mean, put it this way: I've seen enough of his like in the booth like analysis to know that he's not like some golden boy. It's not everything he's going to touch is going to be immediately a world beater. He certainly didn't start off as good as Tony Romo when it came to doing analysis and hitting those viral moments. He's been very stiff and wooden. I don't know what he's going to do for the Raiders, particularly when, as a lifelong Raiders fan, it is a travesty. The front office is a disgrace. We've been in a rebuild since 2000. Yeah, we've been in a rebuild. He cuts
Shout
his
out
own
Mark
hair,
Davis.
though, so it's okay, I guess.
It's so sad because like I'm a Broncos fan, and that's like the biggest rivalry for the Broncos. But I miss the Raiders being good because Al Davis was a fucking awesome owner, and like the Al Davis Pat Bowlen ownership rivalry was sick, and the Raiders and the Broncos both being good was an awesome rivalry. And now the Raiders are just
been in a
fucking
rebuild
dumpster
since
fire.
By the way,
2000.
also Al Davis is also spoken
course,
of, by the way, very well by players that never joined the Raiders. There's so many stories.
They were an
of
elite
players.
org.
There's so many stories of massive Hall of Famers who were like, oh, I actually used to sometimes even talk to Al Davis and be like, when am I going to come over? A lot of people in theory like could have been in that team too. It's actually very well spoken of, yeah.
Well, it's the team culture is like they have a unique fan presence.
The black hole.
The black hole, like the colors, like the black and silver. You know, the
also
the
if
legacy
you go on
is
the
great,
NFL
the history of the
arrest
Raiders is
tracker.
great. So it is
As I always
shitty
tell
to see
people
them
to do,
be
this
so bad.
exists. It's run by USA Today. It's basically every player that's ever been arrested in the history of the NFL, and the Raiders are just so out in front. We are just literally a refuge for every fucking scoundrel imaginable in the football league.
Right. And also, I mean, the Raiders branding became really intertwined with West Coast hip hop in the 90s. Yeah, pop culture.
No, punk.
I mean, oh yeah, punk. So it's like it's sad that
put it this way,
are they supposed to be good this year?
I don't.
No.
Never mind. I'm sorry.
Especially that division. The problem is the AFC West is also a very competitive division, especially with the Chiefs.
I mean, that doesn't help.
You know.
But I mean, we haven't looked forward in so long. As I said, we've been rebuilding since 2003, if you can imagine that.
Also, the number of insane draft busts.
I mean, to be fair, it's like some
over
stuff
the
you
last
can't
20 years
legislate
is
for,
just
like with
outrageous.
Ruggs when he just killed that woman and a dog in Vegas. He just like crashed a car at 150 miles per hour into the back of her, and she just died. By the way, they did an autopsy on her. She didn't even die because of the impact. She died because of smoke inhalation. She literally burnt to death in the car, along with her dog.
Fire
it's like
in the
horrific.
car,
I mean, like, you know, there's just no, like, obviously he's a piece of shit. Like, you got to put him in prison for that, you know, like for a long, long time. But he was a fucking hell of a wide receiver.
Yeah, but they also did weird things in the draft by like getting like Leatherwood in the first round.
I mean,
that's
the biggest bust in the
fiasco.
NFL. Obviously, it's like the stuff of legend. But I mean, like, I'm just talking about just even now, like Pete Carroll at 73 as a head coach is like so regressive. Like, you just don't care. You just don't care.
I don't think they just care about making money, man. I'm pretty sure like they're still number one.
Well, we got that
super in the NFL.
Yeah, we got that super
because of all the corporate boxes.
And again, it's like you've got that financial. You got this financial
stadium is cool
bedrock
in
you can
Vegas.
build on, but it's like we've brought in fucking Geno Smith and Pete Carroll. This is what supposedly is gonna bridge the gap to get us to finally having like a roster that can compete and get back in the playoffs. It's like, I just don't see it, man. Like, every decision we've made for the Raiders has been the wrong choice pretty much consistently for about 22 years. So, no, I don't think Brady's got a golden touch that's going to
They do have the problem, though.
I think we're just a cursed organization. It tells you everything that you need to know, that I've seen Newcastle win a trophy in my lifetime. but I haven't seen. Well, I mean, technically, no. We went
The
to
Raiders
final
won in 2002. Right?
That was when we had Gannon at QB. That was, but anyway, we
Right.
I think we technically won in '84, but I wasn't a fan. I was obviously 2 years old, so yeah.
Oh, it'll be like Marcus Allen era, right?
So I think that was the last time we won the Super Bowl. If memory serves me correct.
I think so, that's right. Yeah.
So.
Look,
It's like I'm the same. Like I used to love. I mean, by the way, I'm of the generation. I don't hate the Broncos to the same degree as I hate the 49ers. If you know, you know. If you came up at a certain time, the 49ers were the team to hate. And with the Raiders and coming from
Sure.
West Coast, obviously that was the big rivalry. But like, yeah, fuck the Broncos. But now, unfortunately, it's just fuck the Chiefs. Like we're such a pathetic franchise now, the Raiders. Yeah. We're like such a pathetic franchise. Like if we just beat we beat the Chiefs twice and like stop them like winning the championship, that would be enough. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. That would actually be enough for most Raiders fans right now. Like we've just been beaten into submission. Like
the thing is like the thing that needs to change with the Raiders is just the ownership, because it's very hard, because Al Davis is one of the poorer NFL owners, and a lot of the advantages that you have in contract signing is doing large guaranteed deals or signing bonuses where you need a lot of ownership liquidity for that. And like he's a billionaire, but his entire it's all in the Raiders. So like he doesn't have the
not all
the cash to like make the good deals. Exactly. Well, I mean, that's what happens when the Broncos got bought by the Walton Penner family. They're now the richest ownership group in the NFL. So they've been able to do things like completely redo the Broncos facility and offer like sick deals, just fully guaranteed deals to players.
Eat Russell Wilson's dead cap. Just eat it.
Eat Russell Wilson's dead cap while giving everybody massive signing bonuses and backloaded contracts that are guaranteed. Yeah. So anyway, there's just a bunch of tricks you can do, but you have to have richer owners. And so I just think as long as Mark Davis, both in terms of his decision making and his financial situation, is removed, like the Raiders are just going to keep sucking.
Or what is it in the NFL? Like if you give a guaranteed contract, you have to put like 50-60% of it in escrow immediately.
It's a long way back. I mean, like 2003, is when we got smashed by it was the fucking Bucks, and that was like okay, because we felt at that time we'd done like the impossible, like a patchwork fucking squad, as I said. Yeah, like fucking Gannon at QB. We didn't really have like any like we didn't really have any like
It was like the end of Jerry Rice,
basically, it was like we knew it was going to be tough to like have any success moving forward. Although I will say, Rich Gannon got, I think he was the league MVP that year. So he massively overperformed. He wasn't the truth. Like he's not a great quarterback. Like I mean, that should go without saying. Yeah, for sure.
He was very good.
But that was it. I mean, like if you look at our roster that year, you would be repulsed that was like a Super Bowl team. And then after that, it's the longest ever losing record. So we had 6 or 7 seasons in a row where we had a losing record. Like no other franchise did that. And then we came out of that, and then this is it now. We've been essentially losing all these seasons, so we're gonna get these drafts in. We drafted like ass. And then, the rest is history. I mean, like, when we had Gruden come back, that was meant to, we literally tanked our last season in Oakland. Like, yeah, fuck you to the fans. We tanked our last season in Oakland so we can get a sick draft garbage, of course. So, I mean, like, we're a fucking joke. We're a fucking sick joke. Like, it brings me no joy. I barely watched any Raiders games last season. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I was like turning it on. Like Yanko will tell you this. We were doing an event. It must have been one of the PGL events. It might have been the major actually, which we were doing in Bucharest. And he would like come down on a night. We'd get a few beers. He pulled the laptop out. He said, "Oh, Rich, the Raiders are playing tonight." I think we watched like 10 minutes together. We fucked up like Minshew fucked up a shovel pass. We got intercepted on a shovel pass, and I said, "Turn it off."
I know exactly the play you're talking about, because that was like That was like a
Yeah.
like a
I was
Sports
like,
Center
it's got to
low,
go off,
like,
man. I'm
clip.
going to smash up the bar. Like, I can't do this. So yeah. Anyway, so no, Brady's not going to help the Raiders. Nothing can help the Raiders. The only thing I can think of in sports that is analogous to it is Birmingham City's old ground. They well, it's still their ground actually. I don't know if it's their old ground, but it's back when Barry Fry was manager. They were convinced it was cursed. They had to like get a fucking, I don't know, like some sort of voodoo priest to come out and like do a decursing or something. Like the whole Raiders franchise needs that. We're fucked.
We'll move on. What is each of your personal takes on the movie Catch Me If You Can?
Isn't it like they say it's based on a true
A
story,
lot of
but
it's
isn't
exaggerated.
It false?
Yeah.
It's not
It's that
actually.
Frank
It's like a story about a
Abagnale guy.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I'll just do a quick version. I think that's an example of a film where it's like, I actually find it like a very inoffensive film. Like, it's a good watch. Like, it's definitely worth a watch. Like, oh, by the way, the main people, Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks, are all good in it. Like, I don't have anything particularly negative. I don't think it was like an amazing film. For me, it's like a solid 7 out of 10. Like, give it a watch once. It's a fun watch. I agree. I almost am certain, Barry, if you watch this film, they've sexed up the fucking story. And as usual, the guy, like, just like Wolf of Wall Street, I'm sure the guy himself's made 10 times cooler in the film than the real life guy. Not least because, just like Wolf of Wall Street, the real genius the guy's doing is just thievery / fraud. Like, that's not actually that cool in real life, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the film, they make that seem like playful or something. So it's worth a watch. I'm actually surprised someone.
It has one of the best opening credit sequences of all time.
I mean, it's not a David Fincher level of credit sequence, but it's still pretty good. It's very stylistic. It really gets you into the theme of the movie.
They did a good job of the mid-century modern 60s,
but it also feels
period.
a little bit Hitchcockian as well. Like a lot of Hitchcock title sequences would essentially be distillations of the movie's like plot, and it would kind of give you like a little, so you kind of you had an understanding of what you were about to see essentially, and that it definitely achieves that as well. So it's a very stylish movie.
I mean, for me, it was really a turning point for me in my view of Leonardo DiCaprio, because basically I liked him when he was a child actor, like when he was in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and then he became fucking terrible for a while. In his teen heartthrob era, he's terrible in Titanic. He actually just single-handedly ruins The Man in the Iron Mask, the Dumas movie, where it is literally one of the worst performances by a leading actor I've ever seen. Because
it's Monty, the like villain version of him in Man from the Iron Mask is on the level of like that Joffrey guy from Game of Thrones. It's actually just bad acting, man. I'm with you.
Well, it's also that in The Man in the Iron Mask, if you guys know, the story is, so he plays the King of France, and the Dumas story is, well, the King of France has a twin that the king has imprisoned in order to, and in an iron mask, so you can't see who he is because he's a threat to his throne. And so the problem is that when the twin gets jailbroken from the Bastille, he has to act with himself. And I said this in our discussion about Mickey 17 on Nerd Legion, but it's like Robert Pattinson does an amazing job of that in Mickey 17. Leonardo DiCaprio ruins this movie by acting with himself. And this is a film that contains many great actors playing the Musketeers, and it is just terrible. Like, this movie is so fucking bad because of Leonardo DiCaprio. So there was a period between when he was a child and then kind of his teens and 20s where he was just really bad as an actor. And I think this was the first film where he kind of redeemed himself for me. And I think he got on track to becoming I'm not going to say great actor, but like acceptable actor again. And I think he did turn in a good performance in this movie. So coming off some of his absolute tragic performances that had happened where he was just ruining movies. I mean, he's so bad in Titanic too. It's unbelievable. That movie is so shit. But another Roger Ebert 4-star, by the way. Look that one up. So I did like Catch Me If You Can. It's not particularly deep.
Like a Sunday
I'd say
afternoon
like
movie.
Thorin, I give it a 7 out of 10. It's a good watch. It's fun. It's a fun movie. Stylish. Yeah, it's whatever.
Yeah, end stage.
It's very Spielberg. You know. We'll pick a couple we'll pick a couple more questions here. I think we know the answer to this, but I'll just ask you guys real quick. What are your thoughts about the moderation of the LOL subreddit over the years?
You know, this is a short section, guys.
Wait,
the joke is we should actually just do an episode on that one.
They know exactly what you guys are saying.
Exactly.
They're trying to tee us up on that one, Barry. They're throwing the alley-oop out there. I know. Hope we do a 360 through the leg slam dunk. I know. Spoiler, not a fan. There's the mildest way I could ever say it.
I mean, they've clearly been propped up by Riot. We saw this when Valorant was released, when they, before they announced the name Valorant, they told the mods of the League of Legends subreddit, oh, you guys should totally make the Valorant subreddit and moderate that one too. We're not secretly giving you inside access or paying you in any way, but you guys should absolutely control that. Whereas realistically, what would have happened is that it would have been squatters' rights on our Valorant, whoever, when they announced the name, got it first, or Riot could have registered it themselves and then had control of the Reddit. But it's just corporate bullshit. Like why are they giving these mods access to this kind of information? Doesn't make sense. These guys are petty tyrants who, by the way, will just have their own opinions about shit, write treatises about the things they don't like, which are also conveniently the things that they ban on the subreddit, but they won't do it under their moderator tag. They'll disable their tag, write some angry bullshit that is lies, and then just be like, yeah, it's totally fine that I am an impartial person, am the moderator of this and deciding which content goes on here. The fortunate thing is that it doesn't drive traffic anymore. Like, it was a big problem in the early days when the difference between being on our League of Legends would have literally been like 50,000 views on a video. But if we get, for example, if we get a video in the top 5 of Reddit, it's like 2% of the views. Nobody actually uses Reddit to click on content. What they do is the content gets on Reddit, and then they go into the comments without watching the video, without clicking on it, without reading the article, and type their own fucking insane opinions. All the normal people have left Reddit because all there are these people who in an echo chamber repeating their own opinions, and it's
just an AstroTurf shithole now. It's not. I mean, it used to be really bad, but now it's like people always say, "Oh, you see bot accounts on Twitter and stuff."
But I'm looking at it right now, Richard. There are 8.1 million people subscribed to the League of Legends subreddit. Yep. There are 1,600 online right now. It's a ghost town, is what.
I mean, I don't know how it works. But like, if you're banned, does it automatically unsub you? I don't know how that works. I have a functional life, so I don't know. Been a moderator on Reddit. But I mean, like, so I don't know. But I mean, like, yeah, the level of engagement these days is just so bad. And like, you can just click on a random thread now and go look at the accounts. You can pretty much divide into 2 groups. It's like the fucking losers that have had like accounts for like 15, 16 years. And they're just karma farmer losers that still like, they're just trapped in the old days of Reddit brain. And then the rest is like, it'll just be a generic name, like, I don't know, like, it's like two nouns and a bunch of numbers, and that's just it. And it's just like, account is 20 days old, and it's just people just throwing out garbage until they get banned, and then they just create another account. Like, that's just what Reddit is now, just trash.
It's also that what I find so offensive about the LOL subreddit is that what they will do is they will delete posts of journalists because there aren't sources for this, even though why would the journalists give up their sources, right? So they'll delete posts about that they say, there's no evidence of this besides
they did
this
that with one in this episode.
Journalist.
They did it with one of the ones. I can't remember if it was the one where it was like the fan response or something. There was one where like one of the pieces, the threads that was in this story got removed. It was actually just because it was on negative backlash against T1, I think, but it got removed initially because it was claimed like, this is just hearsay. We can't know whether they said that, even though, the joke is, Monty, they'll leave the thread with like 2,000 people saying like, I'm like a paedophile who's like obsessed with reptiles or something.
Exactly.
Like, that'll just get left up forever and never be deleted. Right. But magically, it's like they must have just not been.
If there are a ton of highly upvoted comments that are literally like speculation, fabrication, or outright lies, like tons of stuff about me, things that I have proved publicly are false or true, the lies will be there and the moderators do nothing, even though this is really easy to demonstrate is in fact this person just lying. But we can't have journalists with sources putting up threads, but we can have any amount of personal attack. By the way, just outrageous witch hunts, personal attacks. Dom's had it against him. I mean, it's completely inappropriate and untrue and easily disprovable, and they don't do anything about that. But if there's some piece of information out there, I mean, they were deleting stuff about the Danny incident because it wasn't sourced. Like, come on.
I mean, also
it's
as
outrageous.
well, the like most popular user in like the fucking subs history is another mentally ill loser that just uses a bot to post anything and everything.
I think that guy's been. What's weird is I don't think he's been around for a while now, man. I notice he doesn't post everyone's content anymore. The Cory Lulu guy or whatever. Like, yeah, I don't know if he's fucked off or what, but seems like even he's gone.
Oh, that's a name I haven't
could
heard
be wrong.
in a long time.
So maybe someone look it up, but I know he doesn't post like all the.
I mean, it's
explicitly.
It's explicitly.
Who's that guy that used to comment?
Yeah, it's explicitly against the terms of service.
Sorry.
It's explicitly against it. Yeah. Yes.
Of Reddit,
yeah,
the entire
be
website.
Using,
by the way, and they don't enforce that rule either. And also, they took away the other thing the mods did that was outrageous was they used to have the League of Meta subreddit to discuss all their bullshit, so people could actually call them out. And then they just deleted that. So now there's not even a way to have contact with the moderators. They just do whatever they fucking
they
want.
They originally made it
pushback.
because they wanted to kind of like suppress like the bad moderation from the public, like the other people who aren't as attuned to it. And then they would like move it into like its own separate thing, so it wouldn't show up on front page.
Yep. And then they deleted that, so now there's no way, because they will still delete any complaints that appear on the League of Legends subreddit. So now there's just no way to have any kind of reasonable discussion.
Did you guys see the comments for the Frodan guest episode?
Oh, you mean on the competitive TFT one?
Yeah.
The joke is that's actually why I did a tweet addressing it, Barry. I didn't see it specifically. Essentially, the entire thread. There's loads of comments, but there might be like 100 comments or something. They're all just they're all just some kind of fucked up political analysis of me, Monty,
also
and
from
Richard.
mods.
It's just all people. Like,
and also,
here's why they're all right wing. There's nothing even about almost the win trading thing.
I hope they're not using this to get into
also,
the huge scene of TFT. I'm good, mate.
By the way, that's going to be my favourite shit take ever. The idea I'm desperate to get in a TFT. I don't know anything about TFT. I'll never pretend to. I have zero interest. Like the idea I'm that obsessed I need to get in front of your eyes for TFT.
It's also that one of the main people who is lying about stuff in that thread and also personally attacking people is a mod on that subreddit.
Oh, great. Brilliant. Love that too.
And it was just funny too to see the difference with the YouTube comments, because all the YouTube comments are like, wow, what a great show. Frodan was an awesome guest. I hope this causes Riot to change something. Look, I'm not going to be arrogant and say that show caused them to revert their decision, because obviously it didn't. But it certainly was part of the pressure campaign that caused something to change. It had an effect, right? It's by far like the most viewed talk show on that piece of content, because the Four Horsemen is the show that gets the most views. That's just how it is.
But just Frodan alone speaking out could have had an influence, or at least made someone think, well, maybe we have to do something to bridge the gap between where the public perception is and what he thinks or whatever, you know? Yeah.
But I'm just saying the YouTube comments were all like, wow, it was awesome to have Frodan on this show. I'm glad they discussed this topic. I mean, there's nothing controversial in that show whatsoever. It's a deep dive into what happened, talking about it in esports historical context, comparing it to other things that have happened in different esports, trying to have a more nuanced conversation about it. And like the comments are just outrageous. But I mean, nobody watches it from Reddit. The show did very well in terms of viewership. Plenty of people watched that show. So I don't know, man. It's just wild to see the differences. But I think this is why people have basically abandoned these subreddits, is because it's run by a bunch of like single-minded lunatics who have their own axe to grind, and you can't have a conversation there anymore. You can't. It's an echo chamber. So welcome. The funny thing is that when we started doing these video podcasts, the YouTube comments were the ones that were garbage, and now it's reversed, and the YouTube comments are very reasonable most of the time, and it's the Reddit comments that are completely deranged.
You need Vortic back in your comments.
Do miss him.
That's an OG reference.
Minty Crisper.
All right, I think that'll do it, guys. But that's gonna end it for today. Thank you very much for coming on, Barry.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Till then,
Breaking it down.
esports till end est.